Hello and welcome to Best of the Rest, the show where we take a second look at movies that were poorly received upon release and challenge ourselves to only talk about the things we like and what the movie does well. It's comic book month, and this week we are talking the 1990 film Dick Tracy. My name is Chris Logan, and I am joined as always by my co-host, nicknamed after his defining feature, Andrew Big Red Williams. All right. You ready for this one, Andrew?
Yeah. Big Red, a name I have been called before.
You often call yourself Big Red. I think anytime we played Jackbox together, at least one round, you are Big Red. So I felt confident that I could use that here.
I look for any red, Omega Red, Crimson Tide, Red Zeppelin, whatever. Let's go. We run. But Big Red was an old school one that came around sometime. But yeah, Dick Tracy, man.
Dick Tracy, heck of a thing. Another one that was kind of on our list of potential episodes for a very long time, going back to when we were only covering comic book movies. We just never got around to it for one reason or another. I think in part because it's kind of hard to, our whole premise is about, poorly received movies, or at least poorly received on their release. And you look at like the black and white of it, like the numbers, we'll get into it. It did pretty well. Like, it's pretty well received critically and financially. Even audiences at the time seemed to be into it. I mean, they went and saw it in the theaters, but it has this very weird legacy. It just doesn't stick around in like the mainstream pop culture. I grew up in the 90s with tons of movies from the 80s and early 90s playing on TV constantly, or like you couldn't avoid them. I never saw Dick Tracy growing up. It wasn't constantly around. People weren't talking about it. I remember my parents talking about it like, man, they made this really weird Dick Tracy movie. Like Madonna was in it, and it just looks very strange. And that's kind of all I ever heard about it. Like, it was a weird movie that they made. And that kind of just becomes this movie's legacy, I think. Like I said, made money, well received, but people weren't. It comes out a year after Batman, but it is not in the same league as Batman as far as the pop culture memory that our culture has.
No, absolutely not. I mean, and part of that might just be because it's Dick Tracy. I mean, it's Dick Tracy versus Batman. I mean, you're looking at Batman, who is a lasting pop culture character, was still very popular at the time, had his resurgence in the comic books at that point, and it just a general higher awareness of Batman. Whereas Dick Tracy is that thing your dad read in the newspaper. Like it was always like it was always going to kind of be a tough sell. I think something like Dick Tracy, just as I imagine it would be today. Like if somebody announced they were making a Dick Tracy movie, my brain would kind of be like, all right. I'm not saying you shouldn't, but I'm just saying you should think about it. Similar to like when we talked about like Robin Hood or whoever.
Like theoretically, if Dick Tracy were an original IP and this was our introduction to Dick Tracy, do you think it would fare better? Like, wow, look, they launched this brand new character with this own style. Do you think that would improve the movie's legacy?
I don't know. It's a good question. Probably not. I don't know. Ultimately, like, you can take an old property and revitalize it and put it out there, and it can work. I mean, we've seen it happen multiple times, but and you would think, I don't know, in the aftermath of Batman, this might be something that picked up steam, but at the same time, it's a very different type of character. You can look at the similar stylings and things like that, but Dick Tracy is not Batman, and for due reason. He's not supposed to be. But that's interesting to think about. Just the idea that, like, if this were the first Dick Tracy thing ever, would this have made a bigger splash? And I don't know.
I mean, think about, like, I don't know, let's say The Mask, which I know is based on a property, but no one knows who The Mask is until the movie. It's basically the introduction of that character, and they change a lot from the comics anyway, and the comics not from the 1940s, all right? So, more or less, The Mask is our introduction to this character in this world, and that's a huge hit. I think that has stuck around a lot more than Dick Tracy has. And I wonder if part of that, I mean, they're very different movies. I get that. But I think part of it might be like that was our introduction to the character versus Dick Tracy being like another adaptation in a long line of Dick Tracy existing in our world.
Jim Carrey also probably helps. That's, with The Mask being kind of a much more, he was at the peak of his powers when The Mask came out. Like, he was like possibly at the time the most popular actor on the planet. Like, I mean,
it comes out in between Ace Ventura and Dumb and Dumber, all in the same year. 1994 is the year of Jim Carrey.
What are you gonna do? And part of that is like The Mask is like he's the late '80s, and he's a much more obscure character. So when you go into a movie with The Mask, you have no expectations. Not that you have any expectations for Dick Tracy. I think most people watching Dick Tracy were like, "Oh, that guy with the square jaw and the yellow jacket from the comics." Like that's really all people know about Dick Tracy. So it's interesting to think about where something like The Mask definitely does stick around, but I think it's definitely that's just the obscurity of the comic. Like with The Mask, most people don't even know he's a comic book character. Like I guarantee you, there's people that have seen The Mask that still don't really know that.
I didn't know at the time. I didn't know until years later.
I don't even know if they still make Mask comics. I don't think they do. But it's one of those things where there's definitely, and I guess you would think that in a vein that's the same thing you would have Dick Tracy. Like there's no expectations for what Dick Tracy is, but I don't know. It's interesting to think about. Maybe it's just Warren Beatty's no Jim Carrey. That's an awful thing to say.
I mean, I do not associate either man with each other, but Warren Beatty, we're going to talk about him, obviously. Kind of underrated, like his legacy in Hollywood, but he's not a name that you hear propped up in that legend category. But like, we're going to talk about it. Before we jump into, though, Andrew, your history with the movie, have you watched it before? Did you grow up watching it? Seen it before this week?
I going into this, I wasn't sure if I had, but watching it back, there were definitely scenes that seemed familiar. So I'm guessing I've seen it like bits and pieces of it, like on TV throughout the years, but I don't think I've ever sat down and watched the whole thing. This is definitely, like you said, it's not something that was a mainstay of my childhood, of my pop culture growing up, and it's certainly not something that I've even really felt the need to go back and re-examine. It is a very, it's just an odd thing. It's a very odd thing.
It's a heck of a thing, Andrew. Let's set the stage a bit here. Dick Tracy released June 15th of 1990. Man, what a year. Same year as Ninja Turtles and Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Made on a budget of $46 million. Relatively modest. At the box office, worldwide, it does bring in $162.7 million. Roughly 4 times its budget. Pretty good. That's a successful film. Critically, 61% is what it holds on Rotten Tomatoes. I mean, that is positive. That is the majority of critics. It is certified fresh on their metric. However, I admit I was surprised to see here in the year 2023 that the audience score was lower. 53% audience score. And I will say up front, look, #Positivity Podcast, I enjoyed this movie. I'm glad I finally saw it. And watching it, I felt like there must be a ton of people like rediscovering this movie, re-examining it. I know Patrick Willems has a video about it, and people are like, wow, we kind of overlooked this Dick Tracy thing, and I kind of expected that to reflect in that audience score, but no, 53%. People are agreeing with my mom, I guess. The movie is just a little bit too weird for them.
Maybe. I think that's definitely part of it. I think people, it was definitely a movie, I think, where there was definitely like an admission that like, yeah, it's pretty it's pretty visually distinct. It's very unique looking, but the story may be a little flat for them. Not really sure. But either way, the result, like you said, it's odd to see an audience score be lower than the critic score. And obviously, with like the critic scores, we are dealing with a much smaller sample size. This is, I think it's 50, it's less than 60 reviews, whereas movies now, as we've said, can get upwards of 300 reviews. And but it's odd to see that kind of split. Usually you see the opposite, where the critics kind of roast something and the audience score is much higher. But it did not catch on. And there's certainly, like you said, there's not really been the whole big surge of, maybe we overlooked Dick Tracy. And yeah, we're going to talk more about it.
I was also surprised that it wasn't streaming. I thought for sure it would be on HBO Max or somewhere, but I bought the movie at some point digitally. I already had it, but that seems to be the only way to watch it right now, rent it or buy it.
And that's probably due to the I'm sure it's got something to do with the legal issues that surrounded the character of Dick Tracy after this movie came out. I mean, Disney technically releases this through Touchstone. So I don't know if Disney, however, maintained those rights, or maybe Beatty was just like, you know what, I'm not going for this streaming thing. Just keeps the movie to himself because he owns the rights to the character now. But who knows?
Yeah,
but yeah, I was definitely
Disney
surprised
doesn't
that it's not anywhere.
Stream it if they know they can't make more Dick Tracy without Beatty's blessing. I don't know.
Which is just a weird thing. Rights are so strange, folks.
The movie is written by the writing team of Jim Cash and Jack Epps Jr. As a writing duo, they're responsible for a ton of blockbusters throughout the 80s and beyond. Before this, they wrote Top Gun, as well as Turner and Hooch. After this, go on to write Anaconda. Is that a movie we've been covering on this podcast, Andrew? What's the critical reception of Anaconda? That is I would love to go back and watch that movie. They also write Flintstones and Viva Rock Vegas. They bring these guys in for that Flintstones sequel. Yeah, that's definitely something we can cover.
Technically
on this podcast.
a prequel,
right around to that one. Oh, right. It's about when they met or something.
Also, just side note, Anaconda holds a 40% on Rotten Tomatoes. So, folks, Anaconda
Let's do it.
Coming.
Let's do it. Big Animal Month.
Big Animal Month, folks. It's happening. No Sharknado, we promise.
R.A.P. to Jim Cash, who did pass away in 2000 at the age of 59. Far too young, but they leave behind an impressive filmography, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, just alone with Top Gun, Dick Tracy, Anaconda, the greatest movie of all time. These are, some solid work here. I believe they also both technically got credit on Top Gun Maverick for having created those characters the first time around. So, yeah.
And of course, this movie is directed by Warren Beatty himself. Andrew, I said it a second ago, Warren Beatty's kind of like a legend, but he doesn't come to your mind when you think legends of Hollywood. But this little snippet, in the second paragraph of Wikipedia, sums it up very well. Beatty is the only person to have been nominated for acting, directing, writing, and producing, which would be Best Picture to Producer Award, for the same film. And he did it twice. First for Heaven Can Wait, and again for Reds. Only person to ever get nominated for all those categories for the same movie, and he does it 2 times. That is wild to me.
It is. That is something that I was not aware of. And it is notable that he did win Best Director for Reds. And I don't think he won any of the others, though.
Okay, it's an honor just to be nominated, though, Andrew. Come on.
It is. It is.
But it's whenever you have a pitcher that can hit a home run. It's like you're not supposed to be good at both of these things.
You've met Shohei Ohtani.
It's rare, is what I'm saying.
It is. Extremely. No, don't misunderstand me. And Heaven Can Wait, I remember as being one of those, that one I remember, my parents knew about Heaven Can Wait and watching it. So, and you did mention, though, that it seems odd, but you look at his filmography, there's not a lot. I'm actually kind of surprised at, kind of how limited. He's only directed 5 movies. Like I, for some reason, thought he was. And don't get me wrong, 5 movies is more movies than I've directed, but it's
Sure.
5 movies between 1978 and 2016. So that means like once a decade, he like dug himself out and made a movie. Um,
And maybe that's why he's not brought up with like Robert De Niro or Clint Eastwood, who just works constantly for 5 decades plus, you know?
right, and that's kind of what I was getting at. Like in the 2000s, he has directed 1 movie, and he has acted in 3 other things. 2 of which were the weird Dick Tracy specials he made for Turner Classic Movies. So like he's
Well,
widely
that's
like,
the thing, Andrew. He is so busy developing the Dick Tracy sequels, he just does not have time to make anything else. He's hard at work on more Dick Tracy. And we should just say, for anybody who's maybe not aware, Beatty himself owns the rights for Dick Tracy. To keep those rights, he has to be working on a Dick Tracy project or release a Dick Tracy project every X number of years. So he's constantly talking about the next Dick Tracy project, and he has released, and I use this term very loosely, released 2 Dick Tracy specials. I think, what are the years, Andrew? 2010 and 2023?
2023. Earlier this year.
But they're not like productions. They're not movies. They're just like him giving an interview, partly in character, about Dick Tracy. Like he's technically playing the character of Dick Tracy. And you're not going to easily find these things streaming. They're just kind of slipped under the radar. Technically, they were released. Technically, I can keep the rights. And as you said, rights are a heck of a thing. It's such a silly concept.
It is.
When
and
you
like,
think about it.
The first one, to be very clear, quite literally, is like Warren Beatty as Dick Tracy in an interview with Leonard Maltin. And that's it. It's just those 2 guys talking to each other, doing like an in-character interview. And then the second one is a Zoom special where they widely do the same thing. They just kind of add Ben Mankiewicz to the proceeding. And then in that one, it's even weirder because like Beatty as Tracy appears next to Warren Beatty as Warren Beatty. And like Dick Tracy criticizes aspects of his own movie to Beatty himself. And like suggests that a younger person should be Dick Tracy, and then it concludes with those 2 like meeting in person and suggesting that Dick Tracy is going to return in the future. And it's like it reminds me a little bit of like you hear about this sometimes where like studios will make something just to keep the rights. It reminds me a little bit of the Roger Corman Fantastic Four from the 90s, where there was a group that owned the rights to the Fantastic Four. And in order to keep them, they had to make a Fantastic Four movie. So they made one purposely on a shoestring budget, purposely to basically put it on a shelf and never release it, just to maintain the rights. It's one of those weird things where, like, you make like that Hail Mary to be like, oh, well, we don't want to give up the rights, but we really don't have anything like solid planned for this. It's always weird to me that's like, people will buy the rights to something and try to develop a movie for like 10 plus years, and they never get there. And like you hear about the stories and you're just kind of like, what? Why? Like Fantastic Four, I kind of get to a degree because I feel like until recently, putting the Fantastic Four on screen would be a little prohibitive of just like kind of what you'd have to do for the powers and everything. But like, it's just weird to me that you would get it and then not be able to figure anything out for so long. Like, why'd you do it then? Like, why'd you spend millions of dollars and then millions of dollars again to just lose all of that money? And then you hear now lately you have studios that like the rights are reverting back to Marvel or whoever because they're not doing anything with them. So they're all expiring and reverting back to Marvel / Disney / whoever. Most recently, I think that happened with the Hulk. I think the Hulk solo distribution rights finally left Paramount and transferred back to Marvel Disney. So they had a 15-year deal apparently from the first Incredible Hulk. So it like just finally expired. So rights really are a strange thing. Obviously now you don't get this as much just because studios acquire IPs and basically lock them in and basically are like, we're never letting go of this. And, but when Marvel in the 90s especially was in their dire straits, they were selling off rights. This is how Spider-Man is forever going to be at Sony, because basically Marvel needed money and gave Spider-Man Sony lock, stock, and barrel. And it's similar to how Fox was with the X-Men and the Fantastic Four, but obviously Disney just decided to play Monopoly and acquired the whole company and got those all back. So, we really should do something about that. But in this case, it's a very interesting scenario where it's not a company that owns the movie rights to Dick Tracy. It's Warren Beatty. Like, he owns them himself. Like, he has the rights to those. They do not transfer to a company. He has them. So that's always wild to me when that sort of thing happens, where people buy things personally to just be able, because they want to make it so bad. And it's happened a few times, but obviously, apparently Dick Tracy is still with him because, like, not even 6 months, but just 6 months ago, that TCM Zoom special with Dick Tracy aired with 86-year-old Warren Beatty. So, heck of a thing.
Heck of a thing. Before we jump into it, last thing I want to say kind of about this movie's reception and why it is an episode. We talked about the legacy this movie has, but also financially, it does, based on that production budget, it makes enough money to be considered a hit. However, expectations were very high for this movie with Disney. They wanted Batman numbers. And, we've talked so much on this podcast about, in the wake of Batman, the takeaway from studios was, yes, pulp characters from the 30s. That's what people want more of. And we've talked about the Phantom. We've talked about the Shadow. We talked about the Rocketeer. This might be the last one we talk about to kind of wrap up that era of In the Wake of Batman. But interestingly, this comes out the summer after Batman. Batman's summer of 89. This is summer of 1990. So it was greenlit before Batman releases, in production before Batman releases, but you still got to feel like it's part of the same groundswell. And obviously it comes out a year later, so expectations are high. Batman makes over $400 million at the box office. It's a huge, huge hit, and that's the kind of numbers Disney wanted. They really pumped up the marketing for this movie, dumped a lot into its promotion. So beyond that production budget, there's a lot of money sunk into this, a lot of expectations, and it just does not meet them. And you got to imagine that's why we don't have a proper Dick Tracy sequel. Because like I say, you look at those numbers, you look at the return versus budget, it seems all good, but reception-wise, versus expectations, it's just not there.
Yeah, to add on to that a little bit, the generally accepted cost of everything all inclusive by the time this finally came out was over $100 million. So when you look at the budget of this movie as being $100 million and only making $146 million, that reframes that exceptionally into being far less of a success. And yeah, you're breaking even. Yeah, you're making a little bit. But yeah, like you said, you're not getting a massive profit. Now, I could have told Disney executives that Dick Tracy was not going to make Batman money, but I was 3 at the time. I did not have much influence over film like I do now, obviously. But yeah, it's just it's one of the things. Like, we're reading about some of this stuff, like they just mirrored the Batman marketing in so many places. Like, you could go to movie theaters and buy a shirt to get into the theater instead of buying a ticket. Like, that was a promotion that theaters genuinely ran, where if you bought the Dick Tracy shirt, that would get you into the movie instead of a ticket.
Dude, how much is that shirt on eBay right now?
I have no idea, but we need to go find out right now.
I'm looking right now.
Okay, excellent. Because the idea of that is also just hilarious to me. That you literally could do that.
Admit one, Dick Tracy, vintage XL. $22, Andrew. You can have that shirt for $22.
That's an XL, you said?
That's an XL.
Dude.
Graphic print.
I wear an XL. The
dude,
question
are you looking
legit,
at
or is it real?
Well, admit, it's like a movie ticket. This is so cool. It's a movie ticket. It says admit one, has the Dick Tracy logo. I was there first. Dude, that is so cool.
There's another one here in a that's another extra large. This one is $7.35 because it is used and has some slight Well, how slight is the damage here, folks? 'Cause I'll be honest with you guys, I don't care.
This is good podcasting.
Oh,
that's
that's
all
a
I know
large.
right now.
Yeah, us looking at
Andrew, you
websites
gotta
and
get
Dick
this
Tracy shirts. Okay, I gotta get this shirt. I have to do it.
Hey, we're also describing what we see, Andrew.
That's true. We're visually describing it. Yeah, but you can find them. They're out there. Those Dick Tracy shirts. Admin 1. Hell, this is a midnight. These I Was There First look like they're midnight screenings. 12:01 a.m. Friday, June 15th. Like that's like that's even crazier.
Wow.
A midnight release for Dick Tracy. I didn't realize that was a thing at the time. That's
I
wild.
see a men's large. Andrew, I might be getting
Here's a
one of
framed. Here's one still in the bag, man. $84. Brand new. That's awesome. And it's in Westmont, Illinois. I know where that is. It's not far from my house. Can I go pick this up?
All right, let's after this break, we'll just both be wearing Dick Tracy shirts for the rest of this podcast. Yeah, I will be going back to buy this. But Andrew, we got to jump into it. We got a whole movie to talk about here. Heck of a cast to talk about. My God.
There's no way we can talk about all these people. We'll be here for 2 hours on the cast alone.
All right. Well, are you ready to talk about it, Andrew? You ready to talk about Dick Tracy?
I do. I am. Yes. Let's.
Dick Tracy is a hero detective in a bustling city riddled with crime and mobsters. When his greatest enemies decide to team up, Tracy has the headquarters of Big Boy bugged and is able to stay one step ahead and take the colorful villains out one by one. That is until a new player enters the scene, the faceless Mr. Blank, who begins playing both Tracy and Big Boy's gang against each other. Tracy hits an all-time low when his girlfriend Tess leaves him. His ward is sent back to the orphanage. He gets framed for the murder of the DA, and his key witness, the lusty lounge singer Breathless, refuses to testify unless he admits he has feelings for her. After Tess is kidnapped, Tracy springs from jail and runs to her rescue, facing off against Big Boy and the mysterious Mr. Blank. There's a lot going on here, Andrew. There's a lot going on. There's a quick line about his ward there. We got like this orphan that he befriends, kind of becomes a pseudo sidekick. Got the girlfriend drama, a ton of characters. So many characters in this movie. Bit parts played by big name actors. There's a lot happening here in a good way. Like, it's not too much to keep up with or anything. It just really makes this world feel rich. It does feel like they could have made 3 more of these.
Yeah, I mean, there's, and that was clearly, I'm assuming. Just imagine that, like, with as sparing as Warren Beatty's filmography is, just imagine if there was like 5 Dick Tracy movies between
half of it is Dick
1990
Tracy
and 2010. Like, he just kept making Dick Tracy movies and was like, "This is all I want to do with my life." I would be like, "All right, man, you do you."
Andrew, his name is Dick Tracy, right? Like, he's probably like
Yes.
Richard Tracy. That's the idea.
I would assume, yes.
I was trying to figure this out because I thought he might be like Detective Tracy, you know, because everyone keeps calling him Tracy. And then the little kid finally picks his name, and he picks Dick Tracy Jr. And I was expecting Tracy to be like, "Actually, kid, it's not my name.
It's not my name. My name's Jeff." Oh man,
I am a dick. I can see how you would be confused by that, though.
I've been telling them to fix this for years. I'm sorry.
Dick was my father.
Please, Dick Tracy is my father's name.
I was a little confused about that, but yeah, I guess his name and his occupation is Dick.
Yes.
All right. In line, you look at some of these names; they all like clearly their lot in life was decided at birth. Like, there's nothing else they could have done with a name that they were given. But we'll get to it. We'll talk about this cast. Man, heck of a cast it is. But we are, of course, going to start with the high point, the best casting, best performance of the film. Because every episode we recognize one person who goes above and beyond the call of duty, that they actually elevate the quality of the entire film with their performance. And we recognize that person by giving them the Mark Strong Award. So, Andrew, kick us off here. Who is getting your Mark Strong Award for Dick Tracy?
I gotta go straight to the top. Warren Beatty, Dick Tracy.
Look at that.
You can clearly tell that this is something that he was invested in. And I'm not saying that just, because he also directs this and produces it, but this is clearly something that he was passionate about making. He wanted to put in the work, and he does. I think he shines as the leading man of this movie. He's believable as the character. There's plenty of sequences of this movie where he gets to kind of recreate comic panel-esque things, and he looks good doing it. And I love the costume. I love that they, it's that kind of, we're going to go for the dull, muted tones because that was what was hip. Even Batman, just a very dark movie. And this movie's very dark, but there's these bright colors. And obviously Dick Tracy's yellow hat and yellow jacket are at the center of that. They don't shy away from it. Makes it look very iconic, to the point that if you ever see him without it, you're like, who's that? It's almost like legitimately like a Superman thing where like he takes off the yellow jacket. You're like, where'd Dick Tracy go? Like, I don't understand.
Yeah, truly though, truly, it becomes jarring to see him not in the jacket.
That's just Warren Beatty. Where'd Dick Tracy go? But yeah, I like what he's doing. I think the investment he had in doing this and making the movie show. Obviously, the man went and bought the rights to the character himself so he could do this. He was attached to the movie once before. And then dropped out. And then after dropping out, bought the rights to the character so that he could do it himself. He and actually, I just wanted to point this out as well while I'm talking about him. But Beatty is almost got credited for this script as well because him and Bo Goldman significantly rewrote the dialogue after coming on board. This was an old script that the Cash and Epps team had written, a little bit older, and so Beatty and Bo Goldman, who is just one of his regular collaborators that had worked with him on some of his previous films, rewrote most of the dialogue, but they lost an arbitration with the Writers Guild and did not get credit for it. And even beyond that, a guy named Max Allan Collins, who was writing the Dick Tracy comic strip at the time, took on writing the novelization of the film. And Disney was kind of repeatedly not happy with his novelizations. But Beatty apparently liked them so much, he incorporated some of the dialogue from the novelization back into the movie to fix some of the issues that Max Allan Collins said it had. So even on that level, just bringing all of that in and kind of consistently trying to guide this movie through, I have a ton of respect for that. So yeah. My Mark Strong is going straight to the man himself, Richard Tracy.
Well, Andrew, that is a great pick. I mean, obviously, for the movie as a whole, no one has a greater influence on it than Dick Tracy. He's starring in it, he's directing, he's making a lot of decisions, he's getting the thing made. So I think just about everything you like about this movie in one way or another, it's going to go back to Warren Beatty. But as far as the performance itself, it is great. Oftentimes, the hero in this kind of movie can be really thankless, especially when your villains are as cartoony and wacky as they are here. Whereas, Dick Tracy is pretty straightforward. He wears yellow and he carries a Tommy gun. But he brings a lot to it. I was reminded, I can't help but kind of like think about Batman as I'm watching it because they're close proximity to each other and stuff. But he brings a lot more emotion and humanity. He has a lot of opportunities what you probably wouldn't be able to do in most Batman adaptations. And I think specifically of, like I mentioned, the kid choosing the name Dick Tracy. When he shows that to him, you can see like he's overcome with emotion. And you see it on his face, and he takes a minute to register it, gains his composure, and says, "Do I approve?" "Yeah, kid, I approve." Like, gives him the old not. Like his performance in that scene specifically like really struck me. He's got a few of those things with Tess, his girlfriend of the movie that he's having trouble committing to, and finally does in the end in a very awkward way. But he's able to play a lot of shades in this stoic character where a lot of times actors don't always find those opportunities to do that, but he certainly does. So Andrew, I think that is an excellent pick for Mark Strong Award. I'm giving my Mark Strong Award to someone else. I honestly, though, had a really hard time. I think there's a few people that I could go to, just kind of depending on who speaks to you in this movie or even on what watch you're watching it on. But I think at the end of the day, the person that I think is elevating this movie and certainly batting above expectations, I know that sounds backhanded, but I was really blown away by Madonna as Breathless in this movie. I think this is a genuinely excellent performance, not just quote unquote for a pop star. I think the character is also very well written. Because on the surface, I mean, this is like a noir movie through and through, but then it's as colorful as a pop art comic book. It's a heck of a thing, Andrew. But on the noir side, you have this, femme fatale character that's tempting our hero. It's usually about as two-dimensional as it gets. But, spoilers, Breathless ends up being our ultimate villain as Mr. Blank, who I think Mr. Blank's whole scheme in this movie is very clever. You have this very black and white, good versus evil, Dick Tracy versus these villains. And then Mr. Blank comes in and plays them against each other, kind of just throws the whole black and white thing out the window, really takes advantage of this kind of the whole system they have set up there. And by revealing that Mr. Blank is breathless, it just adds new dimensions to everything she's doing. She falls for Dick Tracy, and throughout this movie is trying to get Dick Tracy to admit that he loves her too. And he does not. Against a lot of temptation. She comes on pretty strong, and he remains stoic and true to Tess. And so there's
does he though?
Does he say true to Tess?
I mean, he kisses Breathless twice.
Okay, Andrew. I think all in all, he does a pretty stand-up job, given what he stands taller than most men would there. Look, he okay.
Just trying to understand the line. I'm just trying to understand the line.
The scene that we were on a break. The scene on the pier when Breathless comes to him and he's making one last plea for her to testify against Big Boy because it could really make the case. And she says, "I will do it only if you admit that you love me." And what we have here is like on first viewing, a woman that is being abused by Big Boy in an awful situation. She's scared to testify because she could get killed for doing so. But she's willing to take that risk because she is so hungry for affection. She just wants to be validated by a good man saying that he loves her. And then once you realize she's the villain, you realize she has even more to lose. Like, she is cleaning up as Mr. Blank. Her plan is going smoothly. She's taken down Dick Tracy and the mob. She has it all, but is still willing to give it all away if Dick Tracy says that he loves her. So it's more complicated. There's more shades than just a beautiful woman in love with Dick Tracy, which the surface level stuff, she plays very well. She's an attractive lady. My God, she wears a see-through dress in this. That scene, I was wondering, I was like, who are they targeting exactly? Because this is like colorful, like an all-ages family film. And then you've got a few things like that where it's like, covering the 5-year-old's eyes. But at any rate, she plays the surface level stuff very well. But I think those complicated emotions underneath, she is still able to convey, like I said, surprisingly well, Andrew. I have not seen her entire filmography, but I'm willing to bet this is probably Madonna's best performance on screen. For all these reasons, she's getting my Mark Strong Award.
I gotta say, I wasn't expecting this, but I support it completely. Like you said, I've heard people say, people have criticized Madonna's acting before, but I think she is if there are limitations to her acting, which I'm not saying there are, this movie expertly books her correctly to hide the weaknesses. To borrow some wrestling terminology there. It puts her in exactly the right spot. Gives her a role that she can lean into, obviously being a lounge singer, with some genuinely great songs written by Stephen Sondheim. That was another
Insane
one where I was like,
what they put
what?
into this movie.
Like, I was just genuinely kind of like blown. I was like watching the credits, and it was like songs by Stephen Sondheim, and I was like, wait, that's like, there's not another Stephen Sondheim writing music out there that I'm not familiar with, right?
Somewhat alum of the show. We talked about him extensively on episode 100, Cats.
I always get, it's like when I first watched the Last of Sheila, and it was like written by Anthony Perkins and Stephen Sondheim, and I was like, whoa. Norman Bates and Stephen Sondheim wrote this movie? Yes, they did. That there's a story about Anthony Perkins. Remind me to tell you after this because it's not appropriate for the show. But or I guess I could just tell you now. But it was, but no, it was this thing I saw, and it was like Anthony Perkins sexual, and the second part was like this guy, and I was like, yep, that's apparently what Anthony Perkins did with his time, and you know what? Good for him. But
man, what a story, Andrew. I'm just gonna edit we're just gonna skip over that and put a little sound in there where we're telling the story. And then my reaction, wow, that was incredible. I didn't know if I could put that after the credits. We'll see.
I don't think you can. That's why I was like, we can't talk about this. But anyway, so the songs are genuinely great. She gets a duet with Mandy Patinkin at one point in this movie. Like, this movie is just insane. Like, as I'm watching this, I'm like, Inigo Montoya's in this movie singing with Madonna on a Stephen Sondheim song? This wasn't on my bingo card for a Dick Tracy movie. This wasn't even in the deepest registers of my mind. But she is used very effectively. And then the twist, the reveal at the end that she is Mr. Blank, whatever you want to call him. Like you said, brings it all back around, because you find out that it's kind of Breathless versus everyone in a way, where she's trying to take out the mob because she's tired of being this accessory, almost this property, kind of, that all these different mobsters think they own. But also is so frustrated at Dick Tracy for not, giving in to what she thinks he wants, and so she's playing both sides so that she always comes out on top. But it's a really good performance. I think the reveal at the end is done extremely well. And she just fits perfectly into this world with the performance that she's giving. And I think it's a great pick. Unexpected, but great.
And I got a shout out here. Friend of the show, my wife, she did not watch the whole movie with me, but I was finishing it up downstairs, and she walks down and sees the last, 20 minutes, like the final act, and she's like, wow, this is a striking movie. She's like, this is like, what do you say, Roger Rabbit meets Batman and Robin, I think how she described it visually. And then Mr. Blink has a scene, and she goes, is that Madonna? And I was like, I laughed. I was like, no. And because I thought she was making a joke, like she knew Madonna was in the movie, sees this freaky looking character and says, is that Madonna? But she was trying to guess who the villain was, and I told her straight up, no. And then, it's revealed, and I was like, yes, you were right. Like, I did not see it coming. I honestly expected, we see so many freaks in this movie. Like, every villain is freaky. I thought this was literally a person without a face. I was not trying to figure out who it was.
I was genuinely like, this guy just doesn't have a face. That's his thing. Okay.
All right.
We got Prune Face over there. It's not that strange.
She guessed it right away, though, and she didn't even see the whole movie. So, kudos to friend of the show, my wife. A heck of a pick there. And we're about to start running down these villains, these freaky looking villains. Like, in the world of Dick Tracy, if you are deformed, you get a cruel nickname and become a mobster. That's just how it works, I guess. And personally, My introduction to Dick Tracy, believe it or not, Andrew, I did not grow up reading the comic strip. As I established, did not watch this movie, but I'm a huge fan of Looney Tunes, and my favorite Looney Tune is Daffy Duck. I will not be taking any questions at this time, but the short.
Why would you?
The
Who's gonna give you, folks? If you're out there and you're saying to yourself, I have to give Chris crap about this, shut up.
I mean, objectively the best Looney Tune. I don't know. I'm not trying to say it's a hot take or anything, but like, I think a lot of people say Bugs Bunny, or they have their, cute little characters they like, but it's Daffy Duck.
It's clearly Gossamer, but I'm not going to hold it against you. Like, I identify with Gossamer for two simple reasons. He wears sneakers and he's a giant furry red monster. Like, there's nobody else that I can identify. Yeah, it's quite literal. But yeah, like the idea that liking Daffy Duck is a hot take. I'm just like, what? He's like the second. He's like him and Bugs Bunny are the most identifiable ones.
Anyway, Andrew, the animated short, The Great Piggy Bank Robbery, is a Dick Tracy spoof. But I never knew that growing up. I just thought it was a fun Daffy Duck cartoon. But he is Duck Tracy in the movie, in the animated short.
Beautiful.
And he runs through a number of villains, all with weird gimmicks. Snake Eyes, 88 Teeth, Hammerhead, Jukebox, Neon Noodle. They're all like literal interpretations of those nicknames. Of course, much like Dick Tracy, and they all like have like a Dick Tracy doppelganger. It's all a play on Dick Tracy characters. So that
hear some of those names, and you actually compare them to people in this movie, like, and there's like straight analogs in a lot of cases.
Yeah, Pickle Puss is a pickle, and he is supposed to be prune faced because he's all wrinkly and stuff. So
right,
yeah, they're definitely like 1-to-1. So without even knowing it, I was introduced to the world of Dick Tracy through The Great Piggy Bank Robbery, which is not. I tried to watch it, see if it was streaming on HBO Max. They do have a lot of Looney Tunes. They do not have this one. I'll have to bust out the Blu-ray now if I want to go back and watch that. But yeah, that was my introduction, and let's talk about these villains, Andrew. We got to start at the top. Big Boy, played by friggin' Al Pacino, Andrew. And this is another person that was fighting for my Mark Strong award. Particularly the final act of this movie. He really like rashes it up and is absolutely hilarious in his performance. But man, Big Boy, like I guess he's called Big Boy because he's almost like penguin shaped. He's got like this hunching back, and he's clearly like, Al Pacino's got like a stuffed shirt on and hunches over. Has all these prosthetics, a big nose, and a big chin, and he's acting through it all and really coming across, doing an excellent job. And I couldn't help but think of Warren Beatty directing this movie. And all these villains have to go through hours of makeup and put on these ridiculous costumes and really give these physical performances. Like whenever Al Pacino's doing the song and dance with the ladies, trying to get them up to where he wants them to be. And I just imagine them like complaining, like, I got to put on this nose and this makeup. And Dick Tracy or Warren Beatty is like, hey, I have to wear a yellow overcoat. Okay, so I understand what you're going through. I look ridiculous. But man, I was very impressed. By this point, Al Pacino, I mean, this is post Scarface, this is post Godfather. Like, he is an A-lister. And I'm not going to like name other names, but there's other talent, other actors that would maybe reach that level of success, and they would refuse to give a performance like this or go through what he must be going through to make this happen. And he seems to just have no ego about him giving this performance. And I think it's so good. I love the look. I love what he brings to it. I think it's, again, an absolutely hilarious performance. I mean, he's like the ultimate mobster. He'll kill people at the drop of a hat. But at the end, when he's just so cowardly and on the run from Dick Tracy, I think is the highlight, the high point of this particular performance. I really liked it.
Yeah, he's doing a really good job. I mean, this is the same year as The Godfather Part 3, ironically enough. What, two very different performances. But,
yes.
but yeah, it's really good. Like you said, this was definitely in the running for Mark Strong. He's doing that kind of over exaggerated, almost. It's that joke people make that for the last 20 years, Al Pacino's just been playing like a caricature of himself. Like
Right.
he's just doing like all of the Al Pacino-isms. He just does them all the time, and that's all you want Al Pacino to do now. But it works here. Like that's what he should be doing for the type of villain that he's playing. Like so, there's a lot of exaggerated body movements, a lot of raising the voice, a lot of all the things that you kind of expect a cartoon villain would do because that's what he is. And he does a great job with that. He is definitely elevating the movie. A fantastic foil, especially to Dick Tracy. I love the kind of tenuous or tense relationship they have, where like Pacino or Warren Beatty has been trying to arrest this guy, Dick Tracy rather, because apparently I have to specify which Warren Beatty I'm talking about. There's Warren Beatty and there's Dick Tracy. But
this one wears a hat.
This one wears a hat. He's got the jacket on. Okay. But he's apparently arrested him like almost half a dozen times, really wants to bring this guy down, and Pacino kind of relishes that he's never been able to do it. So he's always kind of leaning into it. He's got all of his plans in place. I love when the cops are coming in and he like basically is like everybody, he like waves his hands and like they switch the gambling tables around so they're just normal tables. The
love that scene.
Woman with the poker chips flips it over and it's the cigarettes instead in these bright, colorful packages. I don't smoke, but I was like, I wouldn't mind having one like a prop set of cigarettes that looked like those from the movie with the bright colors. But he's just great. He leans into it at every turn, and like I said, he just fits in perfectly with this world. Great stuff.
All right, I know I said I was going to run through the villains, and we are, but it's such a long list. So let's talk about the rest of the leading cast before we do that. Glenn Headley plays Tess Trueheart. Trueheart is her name, Andrew. Again, these names tell you everything you need to know about the characters. She is with Dick Tracy, but she is tired of playing second fiddle to his career. She doesn't hold it against him. She understands he has a job to do, and she's not going to ask him to stop doing it. But she can't take it anymore. She goes to, I presume, her mom's for a spell before getting some advice from her mom and coming back and deciding they can try to make this work. Really good stuff. I mean, she's playing pain and heartbreak through most of this movie because she knows what she must do. She finds the strength to do it. She's, of course, very sad about it, comes back, gets kidnapped, ends up with Dick Tracy in the end. So a lot of sadness and pain, and she plays it all very well. R.A.P. to Glenn Headley, who did pass away in 2017 at the age of 62, far too young. But her performance here, I really, really like. I love her playing against Madonna. Like, it's really good casting. I mean, she is a beautiful woman, but in a different way than, Madonna being this young pop star is beautiful. So, like, to put those two women fighting for Dick Tracy and him staying reasonably true to Miss Trueheart, I just think it was very good casting.
Yeah, I agree. Like I said, her departure is spurred by the fact that she does see one of those kisses between Tracy and Breathless. That's kind of when she's like, okay, I can't keep doing this, and she leaves. And eventually, like I said, they come back and make it work. I agree completely. It's like I said, you've got kind of Madonna playing your kind of a little bit more classic, like femme fatale, kind of film noir-esque type of character, contrasted with this, like you said, extremely beautiful, but much more. There's no backhand way of saying normal, is there? But it's playing. This is the one that's been with him the whole time. She's kind of she's not involved in any of this dark underground stuff like Breathless is. And whereas Breathless kind of sees Dick Tracy as her potential way out of this, for Tess, it's very different. She unfortunately sees everything Tracy does as keeping them apart. And it creates, like you said, a great contrast, an interesting triangle, and Tracy knows where he's supposed to be, and that's where he goes. And like I said, it's a great performance. I do want to point out that, like, Dick Tracy, Big Boy Caprice, The Blank, Tess Trueheart, all from the original strip. They're all characters that are there. Big parts of it. Tess Trueheart is basically Dick Tracy's girlfriend, even the kid character that comes in and out the strip. So this comic or the script for this movie is very much drawing from those original comic strips. Dick Tracy, almost 100 years old now, 92 currently. In 2031, he will hit 100 years.
Nice.
So
is that also when Warren Beatty turns 100 years? He could do the 100-year
close.
special.
Close. That's ironically really funny because Warren Beatty is only 6 years older than Dick Tracy.
That's amazing.
Oh man,
I would love a Dick Tracy 100-year special with a 100-year-old.
If Warren Beatty
Dick Tracy
is still alive, he needs to do it. I don't care how it has to happen. He needs to do it. It's
gonna be one of those things where like Warren Beatty he's gonna die one day. I know, sad.
Yes.
And then like they're finally gonna make another Dick Tracy movie, but it's gonna be like bittersweet because like this isn't the way he wanted. It's like whenever Prince died and then all of his music was available streaming when he didn't want it to be, or I think they released a bunch of unreleased music. They did stuff that he didn't want to do when he was alive, and it's like, oh, cool, new Prince music, but at what cost?
But like,
it's gonna be like that with.
I've always felt so strange about Prince because I also wouldn't be shocked if there were things that like he dictated after I die, release this. Like I could easily see Prince having like this whole document that's like, and 2 years after I'm dead, release this album. And then 5 years, re-release this album from before. Like, that just seems like the kind of thing he'd do based off of all the stories you hear about the guy. But yeah, it's like, guys that were against streaming, their stuff all ends up on streaming platforms or things like that. It's that clear, like, they've passed away, so now whoever's left is trying to just squeeze the money out of it. And I'm not saying that they're not, always be closing. I guess, like, I'm not going to fault you for making your money, but it kind of sucks that you have to trample all over the wishes of the person who bequeathed you the money and the power.
It's a tough spot because, like, it's the wishes of a dead person. Like, once you're dead, you can never change your mind. That's right. It's the way it is. But would they change their mind had they lived through this evolving landscape? And that's now on you, whoever is in control of the estate, to decide. So it's a tough thing. I see this a lot with Jeff Buckley, my favorite musical artist. Been dead for a long time now, but every so often there's like a new release, alternate versions of songs, live performances, and I'm happy to get all the new stuff. But his mom, Mary Guibert, is in charge of his estate. And like every time you see these comments like about his mom taking advantage or trying to make money off of her dead son,
milking
blah,
the
blah,
estate,
blah, blah, blah. And it's like,
just
maybe she just wants her son's work to live on, her legacy. Like there's a lot of ways to look at it besides just money. Most of the time, the people in these positions aren't hurting for money. They had no animosity between the artist when they were alive, so there's no reason to suddenly think they're suddenly at odds with their wish. It's a heck. I wouldn't want to be in that position, I guess.
No, absolutely not. And I know there are definitely instances where Stieg Larsson is a great example of this. He was the guy who wrote the original Girl with the Dragon Tattoo novels and wrote the next two, Played with Fire and Picked the Hornet's Nest. Had like 10 books planned in this whole Millennium series he was going to do. Died very tragically after the publication of the third novel when he was working on the fourth. He was estranged from his father and his brother and had a partner he was living with and had been with for an excessive amount of time. But because he was not married to that partner, she got no control over his estate, no control over his books, no control over anything. So his family, of which he is estranged, hired someone to keep writing the books based off of nothing that he had planned. So, like, in a situation like that, I can absolutely see people being like, I feel like we're just trying to get the cash, and you're not even trying to use the plans he had. Like, you're not even trying to do anything. You're just like, well, we can just publish more of these books written by somebody else, and no one's going to care. And I mean, the truth is most people don't care. They see a new book with a character, and they're like, all right, cool, excellent. So it is a sticky situation. Like I said, I wouldn't want to be in it. I would not enjoy that whatsoever. Thankfully, I don't foresee myself being in that situation. So,
thankfully,
fantastic.
my family is not famous.
Yes.
Andrew, you mentioned the kid in this movie. We talked about him a number of times now. Played by Charlie Corsmo, a child actor that seems to have retired from acting. Wikipedia tells me they have a degree in physics, so good for you. Seems to have transitioned successfully to that normal life. But I think most listeners would probably know this actor from the 1991 film Hook, where he is Robin Williams' son in that movie. Certainly the first thing I saw him in. But here, doing a great job playing the scamp, the tramp, the railroad kid trope. I mean, we've all seen a character like this. They even got like the newsy hat and the dirty face all the time. Doing a great job, and successfully kind of makes that transition from kind of a pain in their side to, like I said, like a full-on sidekick by the end, helping Dick Tracy take on the bad guys, rescuing him from a near-death experience at one point. And I think they use this character very well, sparingly enough, doesn't overstay its welcome, brings a lot of good emotion out of Dick Tracy character, and probably is a big part of what helps him realize what's really important and commit the test in the end of the movie. They kind of make this like new family between him, Tess, and the kid. So yeah, great performance here by Charlie.
Oh yeah, he's actually a lawyer now. He got his physics degree, but then went on to become a lawyer, which I believe.
Okay, so I lied. I said he successfully transitioned to a normal person. He is beyond the average person. That is very impressive.
He is.
Who is an acting career in world famous movies, as a degree in physics, and is a lawyer. Like, how many lifetimes has this guy lived?
It would have taken me a lot. Yeah, obviously Hook. I do remember him from What About Bob? Played one of Richard Dreyfuss's kids in that. And then I actually remember him from Can't Hardly Wait as well, where he played a little bit older in that one, was a high school kid, but that was his last movie for a long time until he looks like he did a brief return a few years ago. But yeah, obviously a face you'd seen before if you grew up in the 90s. Like the minute I saw him, I was like, yep, that looks familiar. And so like you said, they find a good balance here, because it's the fear every time they bring in a child actor to a movie is that they're going to become the focus, the cousin on the Brady Bunch sort of situation, whatever his name was. But he fits in perfectly here. It never stops being Dick Tracy's movie. Scrappy Doo, yeah, great example. We don't talk about Scrappy Doo on this show.
The ultimate villain.
Not after that. Don't let Reddit book your Scooby-Doo scripts, guys. But it's hashtag PP. But does a great job here. Like you said, ends up playing a good part, I think, in Tracy kind of realizing what matters the most. And does a great job with that. There is one scene, though, that I can't help but kind of laugh at. The scene in the diner right after Tessa's left and the cops have been sitting with the kid. And they kind of feel like they're going to have to potentially send him to the orphanage. But he's sitting next to the kid, and the kid says something to him, and it cuts to Warren Beatty. And Warren Beatty looks over, and he's looking directly at the same
I noticed that exact same thing, Andrew, yes.
And I'm like, that kid is 2 feet below you, man.
Yeah, it's coffee. Dick Tracy says, I'll have a coffee, and the kid goes, one for me, too. And then, yeah, there's a close-up on Warren Beatty. He's looking to his left. It's like,
You're looking straight past him out the door, man. But yeah, it made me chuckle.
That's movie magic, Andrew.
It is indeed. But yeah, I'm curious if it was like a reaction shot from something else that they just used because it looked good. I don't know. But otherwise, like I said, doing a good job here. Kind of, like I said, adding to the dichotomy, adding to that dynamic. The dynamic, not the dichotomy. And does a good job. And like you said, this is another character that Dick Tracy Jr. is from the strips. And eventually would have assumedly been a bigger part of future stories as well. So Charlie doing a good job here.
All right, Andrew, we can't go through one by one of this cast, right? But we can kind of highlight ones that we think might stand out to be worth talking about. But I'm just going to throw a few out there. Dustin Hoffman plays Mumbles. You have James Caan as Spud, a character that dies in like 30 seconds, I think. Catherine O'Hara is in there. Who else is in here? William Forsythe. And then beyond the villains, you've got Kathy Bates, Dick Van Dyke. I mean, it's like... Not only does it have huge
some of
names,
go
but
ahead.
the characters that Dustin Hoffman as Mumbles. Literally, the character's gimmick is that you never understand what he's saying. He mumbles. That's it. He's got like 3-4 scenes, and it's Dustin Hoffman, who I don't know. He might be canceled at this point. So I don't want to heap too much praise on him, but at any rate, a very high-profile actor playing Mumbles. It's either, I think part of it has to be Warren Beatty and his sway and kind of getting these people attracted to the project, and people that grew up with Dick Tracy and kind of just want to be part of a Dick Tracy movie.
I wouldn't even be shocked if these were like borderline favors, just like, hey, Dustin, I'm making a Dick Tracy movie and I've got a side character. You'd one day of shooting, literally you could be in and out, like that sort of thing. Like,
although he does have the makeup though, like his mouth is like twisted to the side.
Yeah, like. There's characters like James Caan is in one scene and dies heinously. Like that's it. Like Catherine O'Hara, one scene. Like Mandy Patinkin, 2 or 3 scenes. Like a lot of these people, like Dick Van Dyke is in this movie as like a corrupt DA, one scene. Like Kathy Bates, a stenographer, she's in like 3 scenes. Like these are people that, and I don't even think Kathy Bates talks the whole time she's in this movie. I don't think she speaks the entire time. I mean, you've got these high-profile people all coming in to do bit parts in this movie, and that's all they are. And so, like you said, if it's working with Warren Beatty, who, like you said, he's been pretty choosy about his directing efforts. He has been, rather selective. So obviously, probably there's a desire to work with him. There's a desire to be involved with potentially the project, but also just being like, hey, do me a solid. You got to do the payback picture because your friend says you owe him. So. It all makes sense. But like you said, this is just stacked from like head to toe. And it's kind of nuts just when you really think about all the people that are in this movie.
And it's hard to talk about the performances without just talking about the defining feature of the character. Except for Big Boy, like I think Al Pacino, I mean, first of all, his gimmick isn't too defining. Like I said, he's kind of like a hunchback and just weird looking, but it's nothing like William Forsythe as Flat Top. He's got a big square head, and that's like all you can think about when you see him. Or the character Littleface has this giant head and this little face. Andrew, the brow, prune face. I mean, how can you talk about Prune Face's performance without just being like he's a freaky looking dude? That's like all you can think to say about it.
It's a lot of these guys. Paul Sorvino shows up as Lips Manless, and he's just got giant lips. That's his thing.
He's got big lips. He do be having
it's lips.
Yeah,
it's lips.
It's lips, man.
What can you say about lips, man?
What can you say about lips?
And Paul Sorvino, another one. He's in like a scene and a half. Like he's not in this movie very much. I do love some of these guys. Like I love that Mandy Patinkin is 88 keys. That's his name because there's 88 keys on a piano. And he's got nothing weird except his hair's kind of strange. Like, or is he just balding and they combed it to the side? I don't really know. But he like wears a hat and I'm like, oh, you look normal. And then he takes the hat off and I'm like, oh, your hair, man. Is that it? It's like the redheads at the mutant school. Yeah, I have a mutated gene that gives me red hair. You're technically right, but what are you doing?
I'm like you guys, right?
School. I'm just like you, right? So there's always some of these people. They're just they go for it. Like that's the thing I mentioned at the top of the show. He goes for it. They go for it with all these guys. This is hours of prosthetics for minor characters that are in bit parts, bit scenes. Like Flat Top is not in the movie that much, but I guarantee you that guy sat through 6 hours of prosthetics for that. It's like nuts to think about. So all the credit in the world to the cast and the crew for putting that together, for putting up with it, because Warren Beatty just had to put on an overcoat. So,
Andrew, I have been watching a lot of the Cars franchise here recently. My son is about to be 3. loves cars, like cars in general, loves Hot Wheels, but of course the movies and the whole franchise of Cars. There is a character in Cars named Chick Hicks. He is another racer. He's a jerk. He hates lightning. Voiced by the greatest actor of all time, Michael Keaton. And I'm seeing there's an actor in this movie named Chuck Hicks. One letter difference. Chick Hicks, Chuck Hicks. He plays the Brow, which must be the guy with all the wrinkles on his forehead. R.A.P. Chuck Hicks did pass away a couple of years ago. I can't see any reason why Chick Hicks would be named after Chuck Hicks. But if someone out there can make that connection, please fill me in, because I refuse to believe that's a coincidence.
As do I.
Also, one of those people that still has a website, chuckhicks.com, and you can tell it's been untouched. Oh, it tells me right here, since 2001, and boy, this feels like it's straight out of 1997. Are you looking at it? This is...
No, just 22 years, though. Jesus.
Some clip art, just very... Oh, yeah, there he is as the Brow. chuckhicks.com, everybody. Give him some clicks.
That's gonna get a surge
Andrew, I think we can jump into the scenes of this movie. If
visits to that website.
If some other, performances stick out throughout the scenes, we can talk about it. But we got to talk about this bonkers movie and everything we like about it, everything it does well, of which I think it does quite a bit well, Andrew. Like I said already, I really enjoyed this movie. So we're going to jump into the scenes, specifically our favorite scenes of the movie, starting with the best scene of the movie, at least our personal favorite. So, Andrew, in your opinion, when is this movie firing on all cylinders? What is the best scene in Dick Tracy?
I'm going to be going with the kind of raid on Club Ritz, followed by the montage of Tracy taking down several of Big Boy's operations.
Yes.
You mentioned it before, where Tracy kind of comes into Club Ritz and he tries to do a raid, and Big Boy Caprice just turns all of the gambling tables and the tables. They flip over the poker chips and cigarettes. Looks upstanding at that point. But it turns out it's a distraction, so that the police officer, Bug Bailey, can...
Again, he was born to do one thing.
Bug buildings. Which makes it so strange when a bug scares him. But
honestly, I guess it could have been a what are this? God, Andrew, my brain broke. What are those guys called that kill bugs?
Exterminator.
Exterminator. I guess it could have been an exterminator.
I thought you were like, what's a scientist that studies bugs? And I was going to be like, oh, I don't know. But you said exterminator. Chris, that did not
He could
go
have
the
had
way
a
I
number
thought
of
it was
jobs.
going to. But anyway, they drill a hole through. They have a guy on the inside. They install a microphone basically in Caprice's big the big room he makes all his plans in, because he does it all from one place. And as such, they are able to get the drop on pretty much everything that Caprice is doing over the next several days. And so this leads us into a montage with a belting Stephen Sondheim written Madonna ballad, where Tracy is going around the town cleaning everything up. You get a bunch of different scenes of Tracy busting up these different moments, some of which there's one where he just like stands up from like behind a counter, like just appears, and I was like, this is wonderful.
I love this montage so much.
Yeah, so it's so good. Like I said, these are things where like you're getting just comic book panels, like he's walking through doorways. It's very, very deliberately framed. You get all the colors working very well here. Like you said, this movie's kind of dominated by the reds, greens, yellows, blues. They're all the same color. It's very, very distinctive, very striking. But then you're just watching Dick Tracy do all the Dick Tracy stuff. Like these are just comic panels come to life. He's getting into fights. He like punches like 8 dudes at once.
Yeah,
at one point.
I had that in my notes. Yeah, there's a line of bad guys
cool.
standing in front of him. Right hook.
One of my
cross them all like bowling pins. Amazing.
One of my favorite comics, or one of my favorite most like underrated comics, it's Jack Kirby's OMAC, which is from the 70s. It was when he went to DC. But in the second issue, OMAC tries to get into this city, and the army is like, you can't enter this city. And then it turns into this double splash page of just OMAC punching 9 dudes at once to go through this like army block. And I'm just like, this is great. Like, why wouldn't you always do this? So like anytime I see one dude punching, 9 people at once, 12, 15, 20, however many it was. When you punch 30 guys at once, Chris, it's really an achievement. But it just,
I'm not
just
sure
amazing.
I've ever seen on screen 54 people get taken down in one punch, but I have now.
I mean, it's, when 75 people are coming up on you, you throw one punch, you're that good, Chris. But it's just, it's great. It's the kind of ridiculous comic booky stuff that I want to see. And this movie does lean into that with some of its wackiness. And it's not really treating it as wacky, but it just makes it a lot more enjoyable. It makes it fun. And like you said, you add into the distinct visual style, and this whole montage is working. Like you said, you've got the Madonna ballad in the background, so you're getting intercut with breathless. You're getting
she is not breathless
throughout this. She is not in this movie. Not in this movie. But it is just cool. It's fun. It's like the moment where it feels most like I said, we're just trying to do a bunch of Dick Tracy stuff in a montage. You get to see him fighting people. You get to see him doing all sorts of cool stuff. And I love it. It was the moment where I was like, this is exactly what I signed up for. The movie is delivering on exactly what it's supposed to be. And it's awesome.
Dude, this scene rules. The scene immediately preceding the montage where they are busting into the club and they quickly switch everything. You mentioned, flipping the waitress carrying the poker chips, flipping it over. It says cigarettes. Literally, you have like blackjack dealers against the wall, and they spin the wall like it's a trap door, and it turns around, and it's just a blank wall or a bookshelf or whatever. It's like the dealer and all just goes behind the wall, and they quickly flip it to like a legitimate club. It's just so fun. And then you get this montage where, you said it, Andrew, it's delivering everything you want from this movie in like these little bite-sized pieces, like knocking out all these people. Or there's one that I love where it just real quick, you see like a deal being made like in a butcher shop, and then Dick Tracy just like busts out from behind all the meat hanging. Like he knocks it to the side, like it's clearly like props of it's like the whole carcasses that Rocky is punching, but he just like squeezes through them. So funny. A lot of visually stunning work. Like you've got towards the end of this montage, just close up of Madonna singing the song, but superimposed on top is Dick Tracy just walking down the street with a Tommy gun. Like you don't see who he's walking at. He's not shooting it. It's just the striking image, iconic image of Dick Tracy with a Tommy gun walking down the street. Just, God, this movie is absolutely gorgeous. That montage is so well done. It's also what I pick as my favorite scene. I was gonna be a little cheeky and cheat a little bit because this montage is mirrored a little bit later in the movie with the bad guy montage. So I was gonna kind of say both of those montages because they kind of go hand in hand, even though they don't happen back to back. But once Dick Tracy is in jail, you have another montage. It's the same thing, except instead of Dick Tracy cleaning up the streets, it's the bad guys getting to be bad guys again. And then instead of Madonna singing her ballad, it's a song called Back in Business. We're back in business. And it's all the bad guys just committing crimes. And it's really fun. It's got the same energy as the Dick Tracy one. So those two.
Who sings that?
Who sings that, Andrew?
Mel Torme.
Who's Mel Torme?
You don't know who Mel Torme is?
I don't know who Mel Torme. Educate me, Andrew.
He composed the music for the Christmas song, Chestnuts Roasting on an Open Fire, and he co-wrote the lyrics.
Is this something that everyone knows, Andrew? Am I?
He's just a famous singer, like he's just a famous like jazz lounge singer from the 30s, 40s, 50s.
Yeah, of course,
all that.
Thank you for letting me know. Yeah, they brought out all the heavy hitters for this movie.
Have you ever seen the movie Top Secret?
Of course, yes. Greatest comedy of all time.
There's a joke in that movie that I always love because at one point somebody approaches Val Kilmer in this like pizza restaurant they're meeting at for their secret clandestine meeting, and she goes, "Are you Nick Rivers?" And he goes, "No, I'm Mel Torme." They have this whole moment where everybody else at the table doesn't know who they can trust, and one of the guys is like, "How do we know he's not Mel Torme?" And he's clearly not, because Mel Torme was like 60 at the time, but he ends up doing the whole big song and dance number, and then at the end, one of the guys is like, "This is definitely not Mel Torme." So watching that movie as a kid, I was very much like, who is Mel Torme and why am I supposed to know who he is? So that's why I know who he is.
Well, thank you. You've made that movie that much funnier to me now. I just watched that documentary, Val. Great documentary. Always.
Does he
loved
talk
Val
about
Kilmer.
those comedies he made in the 80s at all in it, or is it more focused on like his life now?
Okay, he does. He goes through like his entire career. That's what I was going to say. He talks about Top Secret, his first movie, very, not backhandedly, but he took the craft of acting very seriously. He had a very specific idea for what he wanted to do, and movies like Weird Science or Top Secret specifically he talks
Real
about.
Genius,
He calls it
not Weird Science.
I'm sorry. Excuse me. The very distinct different movie.
Excuse you.
But he calls Top Secret fluff because he meets his I think first wife while he's filming it. He's like, oh, she's on, in a big dramatic theater play, and I'm out here making fluff. And he was very like embarrassed by it. And I think in some way, maybe you can see that in his performance, but I think it only helps the movie. It just makes him that much drier, which works in that wacky spoof movie. And then he talks about making Batman Forever, and he did not want to actually make that movie. He signed on to it without reading the script, famously, I think, but he says it in the documentary. And he said you couldn't move in the suit. It could have been anybody under that suit. Like, you're not asking for a performance out of me. You just want me to operate this horrible Batman suit. So he was miserable in that set. And again, I think you can kind of see it in the performance, and in an odd way, it kind of works for the stoicism of Batman. But yeah, I feel the same way about Top Secret, though. Like the fact that he didn't really want to be there, I think it just kind of helps the performance at the end of the day, just in a strange way.
Because he ends up, it kind of functions the same way a little bit. Like Leslie Nielsen is on the joke in Airplane, but like it ends up functioning very similarly to where like he's kind of just playing everything straight. And that works in that kind of movie because you need a character who does that to kind of highlight the absurdity. And I feel like I've heard before, because like you think about it, he did just Top Secret in 84, Real Genius in 85, and then Top Gun in 86. So he finally gets, I guess, his real acting movie, playing volleyball on the beach with Tom Cruise. But it is interesting because my visual of Val Kilmer for the longest time is those two movies. Like, those comedies. Like, I'm just like, that's how I viewed Val Kilmer. But if you watch him like in the 90s, he's about as serious as it gets. Like, he kind of like, it feels like a completely different actor in a lot of ways. So, and I've read before that he doesn't have the nicest things to say about that point in his career, which is unfortunate because I genuinely think both of those are extremely funny movies that he is a big part of why they're so good. Anyway, back to Dick Tracy.
I agree. A lot of my notes on this movie, Andrew, especially the first one, are just about how gorgeous this movie is. And I
love it.
I've never seen another movie like this. Like, and I don't think we ever will. But you break down the elements, whether it's matte paintings, whether it's the miniatures they're using, the color palette. Like, I've seen all these techniques in various movies. I've seen similar approximations of it, but none of it put together the way it is here. It all adds up to a very unique look. You kind of got the stylized city of Tim Burton's Gotham, but then you have the pop art colors and the detective noir that is totally new elements, and it amounts to this totally different thing. And even though like Batman 89 might have Joker, it doesn't have the cartoony villains to the level of Dick Tracy. No. And I am once again confronted with this thing I always bump up against whenever like I'm in awe of a movie like this. And particular, there's a scene early on where we see Dick Tracy walking down the street with Tess, and the camera pulls back and it pans across the city of matte paintings and miniatures and little lights flickering, and it goes to Big Boy's Club. And it's a very simple thing, but like if you were to make that now, it would be a CG transition. And even if you stylized the city in CG to make it look just like this, I wouldn't be like awestruck by it because that's kind of a cool art direction. But when it's done here, I'm like, this is gorgeous. Man, they don't make them like they used to. This is amazing. And I don't know exactly why it is. I think kind of over the course of talking about it so much on this podcast, I think it has something to do with when we see matte paintings, when we see miniatures and models and prosthetic makeup, we can relate to the tactile nature of it. Like, so this was all handmade. This was hours of tedious professional work. It took people hours and hours of man time to make this happen. Most of that is still true when it's CG, but we don't relate to it in the same way. We're like, oh yeah, computers did that. But like, those are still artists. Those are still, you can't just, I mean, AI is getting crazy, but you can't just type in, you know, pop art noir city and have this pop out. Like, it's still designed by artists and very intentional, tons of work going into it, but we don't, at least me personally, I don't speak for everybody, I don't relate to it in the same way as knowing that someone was doing this stuff physically. And it seems a bit unfair, but it's just how we are wired, I think, just to have that different reaction to seeing something that's tangible.
I agree. First off, here's my hot take. AI is plagiarism. But moving on.
See, I don't think that's a hot take, Andrew. I think that is a very, well, I guess it kind of is, because it's like a hot debate right now. So there's people on both sides. But I think
all AI can do is
agree
reference
with
what
you.
exists. So if all you're doing is referencing what exists to make something new, you're not actually creating anything new. I'm not letting the computers take me over, man. I'm woke, dude. It's not happening.
Hey, I'm calling the Chat GPT redheaded podcast co-host. Let me see what I can get here.
It's gonna give you Ronald McDonald, but which is why I don't wear yellow. But it is. See, I could never be Dick Tracy, because I would jump out and people would be like, "Where's the Hamburglar, bud?" And I'd be like, "No, I'm chasing him because he's the criminal." My sidekick is clearly Grimace, but I'm so funny. But you're right though, and I think it's with a matte painting, you're seeing a physical thing. And I think that's a big aspect, at least as far as how your brain recognizes it. Because I was actually reading about that. Apparently, there was 57 different matte paintings on glass, and they were optically combined with live action. They mentioned the train sequence here, and I actually thought this was interesting. They only laid 150 feet of track. The train itself was a 2-foot scale model, and the surrounding train yard was a matte painting. So this was several different elements combining to make that sequence. And you can definitely tell it's being stylized. You can tell the train's not really there, but like, it all comes together and you don't really care because you're clearly watching all of these different elements come together and it registers for you. The thing with CG, and we've talked about CG on the show before, we'll talk about it later, is that CG ends up being this kind of weird, simultaneously underrated, and I think over-criticized aspect of modern films. If only because you never notice when the CG is good. And there's so many times in movies where the CG is so good you don't even notice it there. And nobody is impressed by that. Nobody is like, oh wow, like I couldn't even tell. Like Mad Max Fury Road is a movie that gets hyped up a lot because of its practical effects. But like those car chase sequences, 6 to 8 of those cars are real, the rest are not. But you don't notice that because it's combined in a good way. There's clearly a tangible thing that is very well done, that's standing in front of it, that makes it stand out to you, but you don't notice the rest of it. There's so much CG that nobody
not
ever
to mention they don't
that,
actually drive through a dust storm. Like much of the weather and sky even is not real.
It's not real. Like they point out that this movie was one of the last major American studio blockbusters to have no CGI at all. Everything in this movie is done with the matte paintings, with scale models, with whatever to create these images. And it's always interesting to hear those debates, because the thing about CG, like anything else in life, is you only notice it when it's bad, or you only hate it when it's bad. It never bothers you when it's good. And I would venture to say it's good most of the time. You just don't maybe notice it as much. Like there's things that are CGI that nowadays you wouldn't even notice are.
Even that though, like I'm agreeing with what you're saying, but even that we're putting CG on a different
we are
rating system than
We are.
than practical, because you're saying you don't notice it when it's good. What you mean by that is good being realistic. You don't notice it when it looks
That's true. Yes.
real, but we don't judge miniatures and matte paintings by how real they look. I know this wasn't a real sitting Dick Tracy, but I still love it. And I can't, it breaks my brain to try to figure out why we have these different ways to judge these things, but it's just the way it is.
I think you're touching on it, I think, a little bit there, and it's just how visually striking is it? How much is it, quote unquote, working? If a movie had bad matte paintings, we'd know. We would be watching that movie and be like, these backgrounds are terrible. Like, somebody still put in the work and did it, but you would notice that those are bad. Now, matte paintings in a lot of cases end up looking just like normal cities, and I think it's very easy for that kind of work to also go unnoticed, of like something where you're just watching a movie that's clearly got painted backgrounds and you're kind of like, all right, whatever. It's a painted background. It's not standing out. It's not visually distinct, but it's still somebody putting in hundreds of hours of work to make those. Now with Dick Tracy, you're seeing something that is visually striking, that stands out for that way. Like Sin City, I think, is a great immediate comparison. We're like, all of those backgrounds are CGI, but it's visually striking and unique in its application, that your eye is drawn to it and it stands out and it creates a unique viewing experience that you've not seen before. So I think, honestly, just the result and how striking it is I think a bigger point, because like I said, you can have good CGI, you can have bad CGI, you can have good matte paintings, you can have bad matte paintings, you can have good use of miniatures, you can have bad use of miniatures. It's all about how it comes together and all about the presentation to the audience. Like you said, the city's not real, but you're enjoying looking at it so much, and you're enjoying all the pieces and how they came together, that never takes you out of it, because it's all built into the tone, built into the style. But if I were watching, say, a movie like Oppenheimer, and we were doing city transitions using matte paintings like this, I would be like, well, this is a little weird for a movie like this. This doesn't really feel like it would fit.
Yeah.
Like, this is a little strange to transition from, all these different places. So I think it's a lot in the ultimate presentation of what you're trying to give to the audience. So, if you did the Sin City thing in a movie that was I don't know if the Sin City application, if you did the Sin City application for, same as something with a serious drama, I don't know if it's going to land. I don't know if it's going to work. I think you could do a Batman movie.
Or if you apply it to a, I don't know, pulp character that's known for being bright and colorful, and then you put the Sin City aesthetic on top of it, it might, it might not come out so well.
Land, and the audiences might not go see it, and then it might be featured later on a specific podcast. And I'm not going to finish that thought. But I think it's all in the presentation. I think it's all in the final product. And if your final product is good and visually striking, like Fury Road or Dick Tracy or Sin City, you're putting out a product that people are going to look at and be like, oh, wow, this is cool. Now, with Fury Road, I will admit, I think there's a lot of people who don't realize the amount of CG that's in that movie, and they try to hype it up as an example of always go practical. But it's more an example of the right combination of we've done this practical, we're doing this with CG, and it creates an experience that stands out and is unique. But when you have something that's just all CG and it never figures out its moment, or it never figures out what it's doing, yeah, your eye is not drawn to anything, so it just kind of all bleeds together. And that's true for a lot of stuff. I mean, there's movies with very generic visual styles where it doesn't matter, but in a movie like this, it does matter. And that's part of it standing out and being memorable. If that makes any sense, Chris.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. It's definitely important to remember that not all practical effects always looked as gorgeous as Dick Tracy. This is definitely a high watermark. When I watched an old movie and they got they're in the car driving and it's the rear projection city driving by, that objectively does not look good. And it looks a lot better these days, either with a rig and you're doing it physically still, or that. What's that LED stage called they use for The Mandalorian? Whatever that thing is very impressive technology. So there's better ways to do it. It's not always practical equals better, but still just always something I got to chew on whenever I see a movie like this. Again, so many of my notes are just about how gorgeous this movie is. My very first note is Batman-esque theme. And then shortly after making that note, it pops up, music by Danny Elfman. He does.
There it is.
Batman and Dick Tracy, literally one after another, and they are cut from the same cloth. I'm not trying to sell the score of this movie short. It's good. It's very Danny Elfman. It's very superhero. It hashtag PP. It never has that Batman moment where like, oh, this is the sound of Batman. Like this is the like I couldn't hum the Dick Tracy motif to you right now. Like it doesn't have that hook, and I've only seen this movie once. Maybe it would become more apparent on multiple viewings, but regardless, still a great score and appropriate for the visual and feel they're going for here.
I do want to point out this movie did win 3 Academy Awards. It won for Best Art Direction, which after our last conversation, absolutely deserved. It won for Best Makeup, which, of course, again, pretty deserved. And it also, sooner or later, I Always Get My Man, music and lyrics by Stephen Sondheim, won Best Original Song, giving Stephen Sondheim the Academy Award. Unfortunately, he did not win the Golden Globe he got nominated twice in the Golden Globes for music from this movie. Neither of them won. But still got that Academy Award, and that's pretty cool.
Does he have any Golden Globes?
No, he doesn't. He has several Grammy Awards. He has several Tony Awards.
All he's missing is the Golden Globe.
No, because the EGOT it's the Emmy, the Grammy, the Oscar, and the Tony, right? That's what it is?
Yeah.
Yeah, so he never got the Golden Globe.
Yeah.
Which is the
I guess Emmy he'd be
if you're confused, folks. No. I'm confused. No, the Golden Globes would be part of it then. It's the Emmy Awards. No.
Yeah, because G is Grammy. Should I cut all this?
Emmy. I don't know. We're having a real conversation. So yeah, he never got nominated for an Emmy, which is television. So he never did any serious amount of work in television, which is why he never got the Grammy Award. Or did he? Just looking through now to make sure I'm not an idiot. Did get the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2015. But yes, only Academy Award Stephen Sondheim ever got nominated for. None of the rest of the films of his stuff ever got nominated for. Never got nominated. So very cool. But and then Madonna did perform the song on her tours following this movie as well. So guys, you need to watch this movie. It's pretty great.
It's very good. Andrew, one of my notes here is, why is Al Pacino reminding me of Michael Scott? It is a very Steve Carell performance in a way that I can't quite put my finger on, but multiple times.
I think the makeup is a little bit as it changes Pacino's face shape too. It doesn't look like it changes his nose and his chin and his hair. Maybe they're a little Michael Scott-esque too.
That, like I said, that man, that time whenever Madonna joins his team because he takes out Lips and he takes over everything that Lips was in charge of, including Breathless. And so he's trying to teach Madonna how to do this big number with his girls, and he is getting up there on stage, dancing with them and sweating, and God, I love that scene so much. And that's when I was thinking the notes, like, man, Al Pacino really went for it here. I love it. I watched this movie with closed captioning for most of the time, and I think I picked up on a few things that I'm not sure I would have picked up on otherwise, like a lot of mumbling in the background or murmurs or little jokes. And there's one where they are at at Dick Tracy's office, and they're talking about the kid doesn't have a name. They give him that certificate. His name is blank because he has to pick a name. And they're talking about, wow, can you imagine being able to pick your own name? And then the main plot moves on. We've got Dick Tracy, talking about his plan and everything. But I kept seeing the closed captions popped up with the murmuring that's happening in the background. And Dick Tracy has two right-hand men, and one of them is named Sam. And the closed captioning said, Sam, you know what I'd pick? I'd pick Sam. Great joke. Love it.
Great joke. That's actually, I do love that about the movie, is that almost during any scene where there's multiple people or they're in a club or anything, there's levels of dialogue. You're hearing what's in the front. There's also stuff in the background. And it's not necessarily stuff that you're going to catch, but you can focus in on it and hear things. And I think that's a very cool, because you think about lots of movies that take place, scenes in restaurants, everybody else is just, it's sound, but you can't hear what anybody's saying. And I get why you wouldn't want to inherently do that because you don't want to muddle the dialogue. But there's a way to find that balance, and it's definitely something I liked here.
Man, Al Pacino's performance, like I said, I like it throughout the movie. I like how he's kind of just the ultimate mob boss throughout most of the movie. I love his line where they can't kill Dick Tracy, and he yells at all his henchmen. He says, "What's the matter? You bums forgot how to kill people? Doesn't your work mean anything to you anymore?" Love it. But he really shines in the last act of this movie, where Tess has been kidnapped by the Blank. I think I was saying Mr. Blank earlier, but it's the Blank, by this new character, quote unquote. And the plan is to plant Tess in Big Boy's club, so the cops think Big Boy kidnapped Tess, which is a felony, and put him away. And he discovers Tess tied up in his club, and now he's got to go and stash her away so he doesn't get caught, and they think he kidnapped her. And he grabs her, and he takes her through like these hidden doors and takes her away from the club, and he's like narrating everything he's doing. He's talking to her as he's doing all of these things. Like he runs out to a car, and he's yelling at all of his henchmen, and he tells Tess, "You got to tell them everything. They crave leadership," which I love that he looks at himself that way. And then, like I said, he goes through this like trap door, and he's going down like this little rail system that he has hidden in the city. "They say I kidnapped you. I didn't kidnap you, but I'm kidnapping you now." It's great. It's just really good stuff. I just love
leaning into it, just having a blast.
Whatever he says out loud, the things that he's doing as this ultimate mobster, it just adds this layer of comedy to it that I was really getting a kick out of at the end of this movie.
I agree. I think this was all a blast. I think that whole, like I said, I texted you before this that while I was watching it, that if I had a nickel for every time there was a movie about a lone hero crashing through a skylight with a soundtrack by Danny Elfman, I'd have 2 nickels. Because right before that sequence, Dick Tracy crashes through a skylight. And like in that moment, like the Danny Elfman music swelled, and I was just like, "This is Batman." I was like, "What am I watching?" And like Batman also had its matte paintings and everything. I was like, I just kept thinking of more and more comparisons, and it really is, like I said, it's not like quite like Serve and Protect, Paul Blart Mall Cop levels of like we just made the same movie at the same time, but there was a lot of very similar things happening here. But
observe and report, Andrew. You got the title of your own movie wrong. Serve and Protect.
You can tell how much I cared about making it, but as evidenced by the final product. But hashtag PP. But I took a girl on a date to see that movie, Chris. Oof. Just oof.
It sounds like you aren't with that girl anymore, Andrew, and I can't imagine why.
I just didn't last. I don't understand. But yeah,
you should have taken her to see a Paul Blart Mall Cop. Clearly,
I should have. I didn't. It was a bad summer for movies. It wasn't. But anyway, I do love everything that's happening in that sequence. Like I said, Al Pacino just really dials it up towards the final act of this movie. Al Pacino, also much like the Joker, falls a great distance to his death.
Yeah,
I mean, folks, and that big final fight, top of a sort of clock tower looking thing.
I had the same thought. I was like, because it's not a clock tower. It's what operates the what are those bridges called that lift? What's that called? Drawbridge. It's what operates. Is it still called a drawbridge? Or am I thinking of like a castle that goes over a moat? Is it still called a drawbridge this day and age, Andrew? What is that bridge called?
Well, I mean, a drawbridge is when you have ropes to pull it up. I don't know if there's another name for it. I mean, something's pulling it up. I guess it's still something. So
there's probably like a name we're both forgetting and look like idiots right now. But at any rate, they're in the machinery of that, and he even says these gears are like a clock. And I'm thinking of the clock tower of Batman, even though it's not, what we're looking at. I love that though, because the Blank is like is telling Dick Tracy, kill Big Boy, and we'll run the city together. Dick Tracy refuses to kill Big Boy, takes down the Blank, and then kills Big Boy, which it's kind of accidental. I think they're trying to show, like he shoves him, he flips over the rail. I don't think our hero meant to kill the bad guy. And we don't see him hit anything. He could have fell into the water. He could be alive out there somewhere, Andrew. We don't know. But yeah, in true '90s fashion, you got to end your movie in a warehouse, in a factory, in a clock tower, in somewhere that is big open spaces, heavy machinery, but nobody around. That is where you have your climax between the hero and villain.
Yep, that's what you got to do. It's like it's like in the mid 2000s. It was so common to have the finale of your movie take place at like you said, the shipping yard. Like, I feel like I watched like 8 movies in the year 2008 alone, where the finale was always at a shipping yard with all the metal containers, just because they made for great fodder. And I was just like, we're all just, this is the thing now. This is what we're all doing. And yes, that was exactly it. Just hilarious that these things happen. But hey, I guess if it works, it works.
If it works. Like I said, I didn't see the reveal coming of the blank being breathless, but I really liked that final twist. He takes off the mask. You see it's breathless. And then she makes one last plea to him. She's like, just tell me, do you love me? But her voice, like mid-sentence, changes from being the raspy, the blank voice to Madonna's beautiful voice. And it was really cool how they did that. There's no way Madonna was actually just straining her voice to do that. Had to be a different actor or something, but they pull off the little magic trick at the end there with her voice changing from one to the other.
Yeah, very well done. That twist, genuinely, I didn't see it coming. I thought we were going to kind of get some mysterious open-ended thing where, like, okay, we've taken down Big Boy, but now there's this tease for the future. And they didn't do that. It's all resolved as a standalone. I guess that's just, modern movies and modern franchise setups. This just jumping in my head and rattling around. But
yeah, where's my post-credit scene of Big Boy washing up on the shore or something?
Where's my tease for the next big villain? Like, who knows? Like, I don't know if there's another Dick Tracy villain that you could tease and everybody would be like, oh man. Like, it's not like the Joker card at the end of Batman Begins or anything where it's like, oh man. But like, there was nothing like that. A completely contained story, which I do love about it, because for a while there, it did feel kind of like it was all about setting up the next thing. And it's still like that to a degree, but man, standalone movies are great. Doesn't need, much like every bad guy in the universe doesn't have to be working for the big bad, not every movie needs to be teasing the big story.
I agree. I'm so glad I finally saw this movie. I think it's great. I think it's a shame it's kind of been lost to time a bit. And it's not some movie that nobody has seen or heard of. I get plenty of people have, but still, it's just doesn't get talked about, doesn't get enough credit, I don't think. If Warren Beatty gives his blessing and we get a big prestige 4K physical transfer box set, I would absolutely be pre-ordering that.
100%.
All right. Dick Tracy. Saw it. Liked it. I know it's comic book month. I guess technically Dick Tracy. Has there ever been a Dick Tracy comic book? Surely there has been, right?
I'm sure there has. I'm absolutely certain there has.
There
was probably one when this movie came out. They probably made like a comic of the movie.
Yeah, I would not be surprised. Glad I finally saw it. Next week, we're going back to modern comic book movies, or more recent releases, I should say, and talking Venom 2. Venom, Let There Be Carnage. We talked about the first movie already previously on our podcast. Now we are diving into the sequel. A movie I've seen already. I saw it in theaters. Andrew, you've seen it already by now, right?
Yeah, I saw it in theaters.
Yeah. This will be my first time rewatching it since theaters, but a little early hot take here. I liked it more than the first one. We'll rewatch it and see if that holds up. But regardless, I know there's going to be a lot to dive into and talk about with that movie. But until next week, right now, it's time for Question of the Week. If you want to ask us a question for a future episode, you can. Just hop into our Discord. There's a link in our show notes. If you're not there already, what are you waiting for? Discord is free. We're not charging you money. It's just a cool place for communities to get together and hang out and talk about whatever they want to talk about. In our case, it's usually a lot of nerdy stuff, like comic book movies. And there's also a channel there for leaving questions. And we have a question this week from Mike Lynch, who says, I won't ask you to pick your favorite, but what is your favorite detail of every Batman symbol in film? And there's a picture that goes along with it showing the bat logos or chess pieces for every Batman movie. Interesting. So not asking you to pick a favorite, but I bet I could come up with a favorite here. But favorite detail of everyone.
My favorite's not on this list.
Interesting. Hey, let me try to guess what it is. Hang on. All right, so on this list we have 43 and 49. I'm assuming these are the serials. I can't say I'm familiar with them. They're pretty similar, old school looking. 66, we got Adam West. I got Batman 89 on here, and it's the correct Batman 89 chess piece with the extra little legally distinct markings on it. Then we go straight to 95. We're skipping over Batman Returns, which removes the extra little pieces. Is that your favorite, Andrew?
Yeah.
All right. So you like the classic yellow oval, but without the goofy extra points of Batman 89. That's your favorite?
Yeah, like the extra points don't bother me really, and I actually think it's kind of cool to make it like a visually distinct thing. But to me, like the Batman Returns suit, I think improves on the Batman 89 suit, and just looks a little bit. It just looks cooler to me. And that symbol, the yellow oval, like I'm a yellow oval guy. I always have been. I always think that that's just a cool. And I like the reasoning they gave for it, that it was like supposed to draw people's attention, like some of the explanations they've given for it. But I just think it's a visually distinct, cool thing. Whereas, like, even look at like the on this list, like the Ben Affleck ones and the Robert Pattinson, like you can barely even see them. Like they're so built into the suit that you almost can't even tell they're there. So I always liked the yellow because it made it visually distinct and made it stand out. And Keaton's the GOAT for a reason, not necessarily as Batman, folks, just the general GOAT. But that suit, I think, in Batman Returns is really rewatching it for the podcast. I was definitely like, this suit's awesome.
Okay, that's a fair take. I'm not a big fan of the yellow oval. Like in the comics, and what happens like organically and what's used in the 70s, it's fine, and I think it does make Batman look a little bit more distinct and kind of have a traditional superhero logo. But to me, like in the year 2023, when I see the yellow oval, I think merchandise, I think corporate Batman, I think slap this on every toy. Like it seems like more of a symbol that represents the franchise versus the man Batman and what's on his chest. I like. And okay, I think you're making a good point where like in movies, a lot of times that symbol is just blending in with everything else on his chest. Like villains or criminals and thieves aren't looking at Batman and being struck by his symbol. They're not looking at the details of his suit and like being like, oh, that,
sure, yeah,
like they would with the yellow oval. But in comic books, usually you get like a gray suit with the black symbol on top, and it stands out a little bit more. And that's typically the look that I like. I really like The Dark Knight Returns with the giant fat bat, which they kind of use for Affleck, but it stands out a little bit more in the book. But I really like that fat one. Another one missing on here, Andrew. Do you see another logo missing from here?
Batman Begins is missing.
Yeah, it goes straight to The Dark Knight, which is a totally different.
Mike Lynch, this is a terrible list.
Who made? You have both serials on here, but we're missing
Batman, the animated series.
Hollywood releases here.
Animated series, I guess, is just the classic yellow oval logo.
It does say live action specifically on this picture, Andrew, so we can let it slide there.
But there's still several live action. Well, because the Dark Knight suit and the Dark Knight Rises suits are the same, as far as my memory.
Essentially, yeah.
Is remembering.
But the thing about the Batman Begins one is it doesn't even have the Nolan symbol on it. It's got a curved bat logo. Like it doesn't match the franchise logo, which I always thought was very interesting. I do like the Batman Begins suit. I like that logo. The Pattinson one has kind of grown on me. Its whole thing is it doesn't have a head. I think is a little strange. I'm not
It's the
sure if we
Aussie
didn't
bat.
know he was Batman, if we would see that symbol and think bat. I guess it's kind of realistic, a silhouette
Are you
of a
the
bat
fly?
flying. You don't have a head sticking up.
Yeah.
I admit I kind of like the fan theory that Pattinson's bat logo was made of the gun that killed his parents. That's kind of cool because it's definitely like a different material. But I think he uses it in. I got to rewatch that movie, but like he pulls it out and uses it as a batarang, right?
Yeah.
It's just like where he holds his batarang.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
It also doesn't have Kilmer's first suit on it, which is just your classic yellow bat symbol either. It doesn't have that on it, but that's essentially the same as the Returns logo.
Does Kilmer wear two suits?
Yeah, all the suits get blown up, so he wears this fancy new suit at the end.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you're right.
And then even Clooney has two suits in his movie. This is only his first one. It doesn't have his fancy snowsuit at the end.
Silver one, yeah.
So there's been a lot of different bat logos throughout the years, but yeah, the classic yellow oval. I really loved when they brought that back for the original Batman Incorporated, where he had the gray and black suit, but he had the yellow oval back. I thought that was a really cool look.
They make it it like lights up too. I think
something like correctly. That. There was a whole big weird, or sometimes when they drew it like it was illuminated. So I have to ask you, Chris. Now you like the Dark Knight Returns suit, which I think is that's probably my second favorite of the Batman looks. Do you prefer the gray and the blue Batman, or do you want the gray and the black Batman?
Oh, see, that's interesting. Gray and blue. It depends on the story. Gray and blue Batman. It's a little more. I mean, like I think of like Super Friends. I think of like
Adam West. I mean, that's the suit.
Adam West. Yeah, kind of family friendly. Yeah. When I think Dark Knight, some of his brooding stuff, fighting criminals and dirty alleys, all dark, black and gray makes sense. Hiding in the shadows, I am the night. But that's not to say I don't like the blue and gray. I just think it needs to service the story. And, we've talked about this a lot, but Batman's kind of cool in that way, in that there's so many different interpretations of him. And they can all work depending on the story. I think it's a sign of a great character. It's how a character lasts for, nearly 100 years, is being adaptable. You keep some core traits, but you apply it in different ways. And so, I don't know. I guess I'm a little more drawn to the darker colors, but there's still stories out there where I would prefer the blue suit. I'm glad he's wearing it, and it works, and it makes sense. The trouble you get into is whenever you're like, this specific version is Batman to me, and then you throw out so much great storytelling.
Yeah, you would definitely never do that. I'm kidding.
Andrew, get out of here.
No, I agree overall with what you're saying. That's actually what's kind of shocking to me is like the Dark Knight Returns covers. I remember like really make that Batman suit blue in the Dark Knight Returns.
Yeah.
Like the one where he's like standing like all crouched ready to fight. Like that's a bright blue. Yeah. But in the comic, it's obviously a little bit darker. Like it's presented as more of a navy versus like the royal blue of the covers. But I think the blue, I don't know why it stands out to me that I like the blue like I do. But what I like about that suit, I think for Dark Knight Returns, is that it's the gray and the blue, but the symbol is black. So the symbol still ends up being visually distinct from the rest of the suit, which I think is kind of a cool thing to do to make it still kind of be a focal point. I mean, looking at some of these other, I guess getting back to the original question, look at some of these other ones, like they're all variations on a theme, but like the original two, like you said, are just that black bat on a gray black background. The movies were in black and white, I think. So, I mean, they're definitely just kind of standard fare. The yellow oval, I really like. The Kilmer and the Clooney ones they're showing us they're both fine. They're bat symbols. They're what they are. The Dark Knight symbol, I got to be honest, I'll say this as nicely as I can. Not a huge fan of the Dark Knight suit. I get what they're going for. It's just doesn't, like, I don't look at Batman in the Dark Knight, and I don't know. I don't feel like I'm looking at Batman. I know he's got the bat iconography, which I have argued extensively over the years, but it's like it strays too far to the tactical, real type of suit Batman would wear, and it just doesn't really work for me. It's a great movie. Obviously it's great in it, but just the suit, I look at it and I'm like, that's not really how I view Batman.
I can totally agree with this. And at the time, definitely. I mean, look, Dark Knight, one of the greatest super movies of all time.
Yeah.
I still maintain that. But like,
yeah,
I remember seeing it, and when he goes from the Batman Begins suit to the Dark Knight suit, I'm like, man, this is awesome. This is so. It's not that I love that it was realistic, but the things that Nolan does with Batman, how he grounds him and makes it seem like, yeah, this can never happen. But if it did, it might be something like this. And I think that's a cool take. It influenced the industry as a whole in a negative way, you could say, and they applied it to characters where it doesn't make a lot of sense, but I think it worked for Batman. And in The Dark Knight, he switches to that suit. I'm like, okay, that's cool. Like, he can turn his head. Finally. Awesome. It's so much more practical. And I think The Dark Knight Rises specifically kind of starts to expose that suit, especially with how many daytime scenes they have. And like, you see him in plain daylight with this suit that's like, it's too goofy to be like a SWAT member, but not stylized enough to be a superhero. And it's this weird in-between guy with a bunch of plates up and down his body. And you do lose something. The superhero aspect, the theatrical aspect. And so I can agree it might be too much in that direction. Now, the logo I think is fine. And I think it becomes the logo that defines the Nolan trilogy. And you see that logo, you know what movies we're talking about.
Yeah.
And I do like, and they established in Batman Begins, I guess ironically enough, because he doesn't have that logo on his chest yet, but the Batarang and the chest piece are the same logo. I think it's cool that his Batarang is that exact shape, and that kind of feeds into the quote-unquote reality of it. So for that reason, I like it, but I do understand some of your complaints here, where it's almost too far into the tactile presentation, which is why our first look at Affleck in the suit next to the Batmobile, I was like, dude, that is comic booky as hell. That is awesome.
That's about where I was going to go with it, because the Affleck suit feels, I don't know what it was, but it also kind of didn't work for me when I saw it in motion. Like, it was this, like, it looked awesome when he was standing, but then when I saw it in motion, I was like, something about this just isn't coming through properly. And I don't know what it was. And maybe it was because there was like, it felt, most of those scenes, it just felt like one generic color. Like, it all kind of felt like it was the same. I know there's variation in it, but like a lot of those scenes, it's in the dark and his suit just looks like it's all gray and the symbol kind of looks the same color. And so it didn't pop.
Oh, are you saying a Zack Snyder movie was a little desaturated, Andrew?
I'm trying to avoid the hot takes. I don't want to make anybody mad, but I'm saying that, yes, that definitely happened. Like, his battle suit at the end looked very cool. Obviously, kind of semi right off the page. And then obviously the kind of suits he wears in Justice League, the more battle suits there too, I think look cool. But like you said, you saw that image and you were like, that's the Dark Knight Returns suit. You're like, it's got the big symbol, it's got the colors, but then just on screen, it wasn't really working for me. But I did love that we just got that straight Dark Knight Returns symbol. And you can argue all you want that Zack Snyder really just wanted to make a Dark Knight Returns movie, but it's a great symbol and it's really, really cool. That suit in particular, when it's in motion, I just don't know what it was. It just wasn't working for me. And then the Pattinson suit is kind of, it's a weird mix because it's still playing in that kind of like practical world, but it's obviously much more primitive, feels like the wrong word, but it's a lot rougher, obviously, than like the polished, tactile nature of the Nolan stuff. Because like Nolan was basically like Lucius Fox using all of Wayne Enterprises' resources, is basically outfitting Batman with this stuff they built for other things that they are now not using for those things. So he basically gets access to this military grade gear that he just customizes to be Bat themed using Bat iconography. But with Pattinson, it's a lot more, I built this in my garage in my spare time type vibe. And I don't mean that in a backhanded way, but it very much has that rougher, it gets the job done, but it's probably not the best version of this that I could have. And so I'm hoping, obviously, in the sequels, they build into that, which they did with Batman Begins to Dark Knight a little bit, with him kind of switching the stuff he was using, kind of switching up his gear and everything. And I assume with these, we would hopefully get some kind of evolution of, by the time we get to the final film, he's a lot more polished in his presentation and his gear and stuff like that. But yeah, but it's an interesting question because I've never really thought about that. Like I've never really thought about like all the suits lined up together, like compared to being like, oh, what stands out about them, what's cool about them, and yeah, I think the '89 suit is still very cool because that was actually the first time I think we got the all black Batman on screen, which definitely was a thing for a while there in the comics and in the various other media. Just the all black with the iconic yellow logo. I think that was a cool look, and obviously I think Returns improved on it slightly. And yeah, it's cool to think about. Been a lot of bat suits over the years. And it's interesting that for a character like Batman, there is that much variation. You would think that it's kind of always been sort of the same, and it is, but it also isn't. Like, it's also like, it's strange how obviously there's all these hallmarks, like the bat ears, the cape, the bat symbol, but there's been built in so much variation of that over the years. Different color palettes, different versions of the symbol being a standout color, the symbol being the same color. It's pretty interesting.
I've thought about this specifically when I play a hallmark of Spider-Man games, even before these most recent Insomniac ones, is like there's a bunch of different spider suits. You got your classic suit, and then you can unlock all these different suits to wear. And I'm always struck by like, man, Spider-Man has had a lot of different suits, and I get that a lot of suits you're wearing are like different characters technically than Peter Parker, but regardless, I'm like, man, there's been a lot of variation in the Spider-Man costume. Does he have webs under his arms? How much is blue? How much is red? What color is the webbing? Is it raised? And I was like, it's not like Batman, who's kind of had one basic suit with little variations, but once you line them all up next to each other, it's like, no, these are like totally different suits. Whether it's the material or the logo, obviously, the coloring. He maybe hasn't had as much variation as Spider-Man, but it's more than kind of you realize until you line them all up.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's kind of like Superman stuff is almost always playing by some very similar hallmarks. If you get different Superman suits, they're almost always one-offs or different characters or Elseworlds tales or whatever. I always did like that about the Arkham games, that there was just, you could switch through so many different suits. I remember, I think, oh man, I don't remember what movie or game was out around when the Green Lantern movie came out, but I think if you bought the Green Lantern movie, you got the Bat Sinestro Corps skin for one of the Arkham games. And I thought that was awesome. And I always liked that about it, trying to pick my favorite of the suits. The Spider-Man games are the same, but yeah, it's like with Superman. Like, it's always a blue suit with the symbol. And there's a little bit of room for variation in that. They've made it look more armored. They've, gotten rid of the trunks. They've kept the trunks. But you're almost always playing in the same color palette. You're always playing in the same symbol, the same look. It's hard to differentiate. Like I said, if you're getting different looks like Red Sun, or like when he comes back from being dead and it's the all black suit, those are usually very short-lived. And he's back to the classic suit. It's never a question of will the classic suit come back. It's when is the classic suit coming back. And Batman is one of those people that it can switch and it can stay that way for a long time, and it doesn't need to go back to what it was. So it's always interesting to think about.
You know what's weird about Superman's costume, and he has this in common with Spider-Man, is he has two distinct logos. The one on his chest and the one on his cape are always different colors, or sometimes even like a different look. Same with Spider-Man. He's always got like his, this is my, like, this Spider-Man logo. But then his back has that fat spider randomly. I was like, why does he have two distinct icons on him? Superman and Spider-Man, both. It's weird.
Superman, it's always kind of been gold on the cape because I can't think, because the cape is red. It's not blue like the suit. So they have tried to figure out to stand out. So they've always just kind of made it gold.
But it's not like you have to have a symbol on your cape. Most superheroes
Well,
don't
they've gotten rid of it. That's kind of where I was going with it. There has been Superman redesigns where they just don't have anything on the cape. Like and they did that in like Man of Steel. There's nothing on his cape in Man of Steel. Spider-Man, I can't speak to that. But with Superman, they have experimented with just not having anything on his cape. especially as you kind of deal with some different looks and styles. But like I think when he came back in the New 52, they definitely ditched the cape symbol, but it probably came back at some point. But yeah, that is always funny when like you've got Spider-Man always got me where like it was the front spider and then on the back was just this giant ridiculous spider.
Yeah,
that's a John Peters spider on the back there.
Great question. I love it. I love talking Batman, obviously,
Yeah.
but you get into the nerdy details of a logo and how it changes over the years. Hey, what's your favorite Batman logo variation? I would like to hear about it. Hop into that Discord and let us know all about it. And you know what? I haven't said this in a while. Head over to Apple Podcasts and leave a review for our podcast, please. We would certainly appreciate it. Something fast, free, and fun you can do that really helps us out a lot. And if you do, we will read your review on a future episode. Your words coming out of my mouth. You can make it happen over at Apple Podcasts. Next week, we're talking Venom 2. And until then, just remember that maybe not every movie is great,
but all movies have greatness.
Thank you to Mark Benavides for singing our theme song. You can check him out on Instagram at NotThatMarkAnthony. And thanks to Mitch for the music. You can check him out on Twitter. Is it still Twitter, or do I say check him out on X, Andrew? I don't know what the state of that is, but follow him over there on that platform at I'm a Biggie Boy, and check our show notes for the SoundCloud link. Check out our store on TeePublic for some Best of the Rest merch. And if you enjoy this episode, please share it with a friend. It's the only way that we grow. And follow us on social media at BOTRcast. Thank you. All right, the one that I found is a large. Oh, it's got the theater printed on it.
That's even cooler, dude.
Above the admit one, that yellow bar. If you zoom in, it's got the theater you're seeing it at. Dude,
that's awesome. This is so cool. Like, this is an
Man
awesome
Southwest Plaza in the mall. 8501 West Bowles Avenue.
Well, yeah, now I got to make sure I get one that has that. I got to make sure I have one that does that.
But the one I'm looking at, like, it's a lot. The image is a lot bigger than last one, so that makes me think it might be a reprint. Or honestly, I don't know if I really care.
Well, because the one at the top that's $22, I think that's a reprint because the brand on the shirt is different than a lot of the others, but it also looks like, oh no, it's not. Never mind. But it doesn't have the movie.
Yeah, the one at the top,
but
the image is a lot smaller.
But if you look at one that has the theater on it, it genuinely looks that might just be a stamp, and like it's gonna wash off. Like, so you have to be careful about it. Like, because this one says Salem Center Movie Land,
Cedar Rapids.
Dude, this is awesome. This is the coolest thing in the world.
This is a very cool
Here's one
promotion.
That's clearly well used,
and they should bring it back.
This is extremely awesome. This is something that I wish they.
Oh, I see the one you're talking about in the bag. Yeah.
Yeah, there's one in a bag. He wants $84 for it though. So.
Yeah, there's the one in the bag doesn't have a theater, so I think you might be right about it being stamped.
Yeah, like every single one I'm seeing is like, yeah, I think that thing is stamped, and I think over time, if you wear it, it's going to wear off. Which, you know,
well, I want to wear
that
it.
Sucks. Yeah,
ooh, this one
like,
has
why wouldn't you wear it?
A certificate of authenticity. Or let me zoom in on this. What does this say?
What is this?
How do you zoom?
The Lindale Theater.
How do I zoom?
You just hold over the image.
Well, I need to like zoom in more than that.
Oh.
Okay. Oh, I see. I got it.
Yeah, some of these are
dear Dick Tracy fan, congratulations. You have just purchased a specially designed Dick Tracy t-shirt, which is your ticket to a unique movie-going experience. You must wear your t-shirt ticket to be admitted. This t-shirt ticket is good only for one admission to the first show of Dick Tracy at 12:01 a.m. on Friday, June 15th, 1990. We suggest you arrive at 11:30 Thursday night, June 14th, so that you will not miss any of our special added attraction, Roller Coaster Rabbit, which will precede Dick Tracy. That's a Roger Rabbit cartoon.
Yeah, it is.
Your t-shirt ticket may be used only at the theater where it was purchased. Each t-shirt ticket is specially marked and cannot be used for admission at any other theater or any show. Remember, wear your t-shirt Thursday night, enjoy the show. God, that's so cool. So the theaters must have just got all the shirts. The theater stamps them and then sells them.
Yeah, here's one with the bag,
Man, that
too.
is cool.
This is one with the bag. It's an XL, and he's asking for 40, but I might offer him 25 and see if he takes it.
Man,
Dude, this is rad. This is awesome. How do they not do this all the time? Like they do like weird promotions now. Like when I go to movies now, like I get like patches sometimes. Like I got the Mission Impossible pin and stuff. Nobody's doing shirts.
I mean, I like giveaways. Yeah, I've got Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol Midnight Premiere IMAX poster. That was pretty cool. But the idea of buying something in it being your ticket,
that's cool.
I feel like, yeah, they would never do something. It would be like, here's your digital code.
There's tons of these out there. So like, there's tons of them out there, and they're not particularly expensive either. This one's fake. This one's like a reprint. I can tell. It's in too nice a shape. Or is it?
See, I honestly,
know. Like,
I don't
that's
know if
the thing. Like, I don't
know if I care. I think I might want one.
At the end of the day, too, like, I was like, oh, the brand of shirt is different. But, like, if you're making shirts nationwide, they're probably going to be different. Like, you're not going to get the same brand for all the shirts. So, like, this is crazy, though.
I mean, I would wear it. I'm going to buy it and wear it.
Oh, yeah.
Would you
absolutely.
Wear it? Okay.
I would absolutely wear it if I buy it.
Right, same page.
I will bring it down to Houston next time I'm there, and we will wear them.
And we will be the coolest people in Houston.
No one's going to get it. No one's going to
We'll walk down the street and they say, those people saw Dick Tracy in 1990.
Man, I kind of like the ones that the theater name is all faded out a little bit because it looks real.
Yeah.
Like this one I'm a little sketch of just because the theater says Pacific Hollywood.
Yeah, no
like,
address or nothing like
Hollywood.
the others.
Yeah, like,
I saw that one.
Well, some of them it is. Like one, I can clearly tell it's a stamp and it just says AMC Academy 8. So I think I think that part was just kind of left to the theater to decide. Like you just put whatever name you want on it. And this is nuts. I'm gonna have to buy one of these. It's gonna happen.
After the recording, I'm gonna buy one.
Definitely happening. Yeah. So
okay.
Anyway,
let's get into it. Half of that is gonna be after credits.
Yes.